Good evening. This is the August 22nd, 2024 meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. My name is Seth Engelborg, the chair of the Conservation Commission. We are meeting today at the Public Safety Room and also via Zoom for a hybrid format. The first thing we'll be doing is establishing the quorum. So if you're here, please say here. Mike Mizzarelli.
Here.
Tim Brain.
Here.
Linda Williams. Here. Joe Plandowski. John Schaefer.
Here.
And I'm here. And we have an agenda before us. We'll go through the continuances on that agenda. Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously. So the items that are being continued on today's agenda are the following. Under public hearing, notice of intent, we have Sconset Beach Preservation Fund at 59 through 83 Baxter Road, SE 48 3759. That is being continued until September 5th. We also have Nantucket Islands Land Bank, Creeks Preserve, SE 48 3800, being continued until November 5th. And under certificates of compliance, we have Nantucket Islands Land Bank, Creeks Preserve, SE 48 3388, continued until November 5th. And Nantucket Islands Land Bank, 80 Mycomb Avenue, SE 48 3770, continued until November 5th. Staff, is there anything else that I'm missing?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we'll begin our meeting today under public meeting, public comment for items not on the agenda. Just as a reminder, we will be using the select board's protocols for comment during public comment, establishing a 3-minute maximum comment timeline, and the board will be taking issues in public comment under advisement, but won't be deliberating on those. Is anybody physically in the room wishing to make a comment? Okay. Is anybody on Zoom wishing to make a public comment? Yes, Dr. Kriebel, will bring you over, and then you can make a public comment if it's something that's not related to an agenda item. Dr. Kriebel, are you there? Okay.
There we go. Perhaps you
Yes.
can let me know if you can have made connection here.
Yes, Dr. Kriebel, we can hear you. Is your comment related to an item on the agenda or not?
Well, it's related to the GeoTube issue.
Okay, then I'll ask you to refrain and hold your comment until that part of the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you as well. So seeing no other public comments, we will move on from the public meeting into the public hearing. And we will begin with Sconset Beach Preservation Fund at 41 through 119 Baxter Road, SE 48 3736. And before we get too deep into the discussion today, I'd like to lay out what I think is an appropriate way to proceed with this hearing. And if commissioners agree to that, that would be desirable, but if people have different opinions, then we can take those as well. So I think we do need to get back to reviewing the proposed order of conditions and going through the findings and conditions, especially the changes that have come to light over the past few weeks. But I think before we do that, we need a few updates. The first is an update related to legal services, both the legal services being rendered by Beveridge and Diamond and also by Town Council. And then additionally, I'd like to offer an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items generally related to this project, because at the last meeting, I offered the opportunity for them to send in some written submissions, and we have received multiple written submissions at this point. And before we get back into the order of conditions, I think it makes sense to have these submissions kind of be talked about, not necessarily deliberated on, but just making sure that everybody is aware of what has been submitted and feels included in this process. Commissioners, does that sound okay? Okay, someone from staff, would you like to give a legal update?
Sure. So it is posted up on the website as well. The executed agreement between the town and Beveridge and Diamond was posted up for everyone to see. That's been obviously shared with all parties. That work is underway. We're pressing for kind of a delivery date on when that will be. Unfortunately, don't have that date at this moment, but hopefully we'll have that very soon. And then as far as town council goes, I'm not sure if there's a question relative to town council's participation or.
Yes, I mean, it's my understanding from watching the select board meeting, the town council indicated they were going to start attending our hearings. Is that something that's real, or is that something that was just said?
So
Yeah, but
he is, I know Vince raised his hand, but George has been authorized by the select board to attend on their behalf as the applicant
okay,
and not as counsel to the commission.
okay.
I think
Thank
Vince
you.
can clarify that a little bit more as
Mr.
well.
Murphy, please go ahead.
In an extremely brief way, I do believe Attorney Pucci is online. He may need to change his name. He's using my link.
Okay, thank you. I'm
And he
assuming
has his hand raised.
I'm assuming the hand raised under Vince Murphy is George Pucci. Attorney Pucci, if you are there and wish to speak, please do so.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. This is George Pucci from KP Law. I have no idea why I show up as Vince, but I am at the meeting.
We got it
And I'm-
fixed.
And I'm actually not here specifically representing the applicant, whether that be the select board or the town or SPPF. I was asked by the select board to attend your hearings, and that was authorized by the town manager. So I'm just here paying attention to what's going on. As you saw, some issues came up last night for the select board related to, signatures on notices of intent and issues like town meeting vote requirements for any license of town-owned land in any approved project area. So the select board and the town manager thought it would be good if I just got more of a handle on your ongoing proceedings. I have a full copy of the filings that are on file with you that I got through Vince. And, I intend to attend your hearings, but pretty much not speak unless spoken to. But I'm not here as like some sort of policing agent. I'm just here to make sure that I'm fully up to speed on your proceedings so that whatever questions may or may not come up through the select board or otherwise, I can advise the select board on those issues. So hopefully that explains my attendance. And I have to say, it's good to be with you. I miss your commission, and it's good to be at one of your meetings. So hopefully everyone understands my presence. And I'm basically, town council has kind of a obligation like to advise the town, as directed on issues through the town manager and the select board. So I'm not here specifically representing anybody. I'm just here as town council as requested by the select board. And hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Attorney Pucci. And I think it's clear for the record that you're here in an observational role. And I trust that if that changes and you are here to represent any specific party, that you'll make it known to us. So I appreciate that. And it is good to see you.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
Great. So with that being said, do commissioners have any questions or comments related to any of those legal updates? Yes, go ahead, Linda.
Did you talk to those guys about when we need this opinion from them, like now?
So I spoke with them again after the signed agreement went in early August and kind of emphasized that we are hoping to have that in hand before the end of the month. And they knew when the hearing dates were, so I'll follow up with them, but I was hoping to have that for this evening.
Okay, the next one's September 5th.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to allow the public to raise any concerns or comments or reference any letters that they may have submitted and make sure that that gets fully encapsulated in the record. I will ask that members of the public please do a few things for the sake of our process. First is to not be repetitive of what you have already said or what others are saying. If it's in a letter and you just want to give a quick summary, that would be great, but we don't need to have the whole letter read out. And the second is if your issues are general, we will hear them now. But if they relate to specific conditions and you want to have an opportunity to weigh in on a specific condition, we will be going through this hearing process as a public hearing. So I'll ask that you refrain from comments on specific findings or specific conditions until that point. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, so what we'll do is we will, just for ease, we will go to members of the public physically in the room first, and then we will go to Zoom. Does anybody physically present in the room wish to make a comment?
We have such a large audience.
We have some people here, though. Yes, please come up to the mic, identify yourself for the record, and make your comment when you're ready.
Hi, Chair Engelberg. Thank you for recognizing me. My name is Doug Rose. I'm a member of the public. I think I said in a previous public comment that I've been following this issue with great interest for, I think it's been about 4 years now. So thank you again for the chance to make another public comment. My comment today was really, I do have some very specific comments about specific conditions and the language that's being used and whatnot. I think just to open things up, I would like to suggest that if there's a sense that because Beta Group in particular has reviewed the NOI and all the materials that are associated with it, to the degree that they said everything looks honky-dory, I would just offer a cautionary note, and that is that I have, in the amount of time I've spent going through the 354 pages a couple of times, I have found things that are not only, questionable in terms of where you are on your subjective judgment. Are you in favor of geotubes? Are you opposed to them? But are just objectively, as written, sort of nonsensical. And so I just think it's important to be wary of the fact that the devil is truly in the details. And I do think there's a reason why it's taken 8 months to get this far. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes several more months to get through it all, because it is incredibly complex. And I know you guys appreciate that, but I certainly do as a member of the public. And I really admire the amount of time you guys have spent on all this. I would just end by saying, I do have one example to kind of bear that out. And I brought a tape measure to kind of just play a little bit of theater. If you look at condition 64F, as originally drafted, it talked about the walkable beach being in failure when the mean high water line reaches the second tier of the geotubes. And the reason that one kind of sticks with me is that if you've studied any of the engineering drawings and you've looked at any of the backstory on how the existing geotubes are put together, each geotube is 7 feet tall, right? The base of the first layer is set at mean low water, So let's assume the floor, pretend the floor is me in the water, and my toes are right now getting a little wet, right? But the top of the first tier is 7 feet up. It's right there, okay? The way this is written, it would say that mean high water line, which is only 3 feet up, 3 feet right here, where my belt is, right? My belt would have to reach 7 feet. That's not going to happen in anybody's lifetime. That's going to happen centuries from now, given that sea level rise is happening a few millimeters a year. So I guess I just I call that out because it's an example of, I think, several situations in the NOI and in some of these orders where it really does require a lot of scrutiny and intense attention. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. And as we get to that condition or other specific ones, if you would like to elaborate, please do so. Anyone else from the room physically present? Okay, and then if not, I see that we do have people from Zoom wishing to speak. I'll recognize Burton Balkine. Please introduce yourself for the record and then go ahead when you are ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Burton Balkine for the record. And I wanted to ask a question. I attended last night's select board meeting, and my understanding is about Councilor Pucci's comments that a vote for the town meeting will be necessitated for the project to actually commence. And is it my understanding that this fall is probably off the tables because the warrant's already been set? So the next available time for that window would be next spring. Am I correct on that?
Thank you, Mr. Balkine. I can speak to this because it is a bit complicated for members of the public to understand. And if I don't give the full picture, I am confident that some combination of staff and council will correct me. But the specific part of the town code that you're referencing, chapter 67 1E, does not relate really specifically to the Conservation Commission process. It relates more to the select board process in that piece of the town code requires a town meeting vote for a lease or license to be issued. But that is not what we do here. We review notices of intent and issue or deny orders of conditions. But you are correct in that if this project receives a positive order of conditions, at some point before it can be constructed, it will need to receive a license by the town through its select board for the use of a town-owned coastal property for coastal protection purposes. And that vote will be subject to town meeting approval. But nothing in that code or that chapter of the code prevents us from proceeding. It does, however, mean that the project cannot be constructed until that appropriate process has been completed. If staff or anyone else wants to weigh in, go for it. Yes,
I'll
Jeff,
hop in
go ahead.
quickly. And with that too, it's not unique to this project. The town meeting approval for the license probably is, but like with any project, you're required to have all required permits before proceeding, whether it's Chapter 91, a building permit, HDC permit, anything from health department for like septic systems. So it's not unique to that. It's just a different process than normal. And then to add that too, obviously, things requiring town meeting vote, there's avenues to pursue annual town meeting or a special town meeting. There's citizen ways to do that. But again, that's not necessarily within the scope of the Wetlands Protection Act or the bylaw.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'm just going to quickly break my own precedent here, but there is an additional finding that was added that we'll talk about later that's specifically related to that chapter. And that finding basically just says that this process needs to play out. But the Conservation Commission doesn't really have any say over leasing or licensing of land. All we're saying is that this additional requirement exists and the applicant needs to do it. Just like if somebody wants to do something that requires a Chapter 91 license, we say this additional licensing exists, you have to do it. But we don't have any say over that specific part of the town code. It's very, very much a select board issue.
And Seth, can I just
Yes,
add?
go ahead, Mr. Pucci, Attorney Pucci.
Hi, I put myself on camera. I don't know if I'm on camera, but
Yes, you
anyway,
are.
I can
You
see
are.
you. You know, I'm going to speak when spoken to and only through you, Mr. Chair. If you have any questions that come up that you think I can shed light on, I'm happy to answer them, even though I'm not really here for that purpose. But I just wanted to affirm what you said. You explained the situation exactly correctly. If this project is approved, it would definitely need town meeting approval of a license for town-owned land in the project area. And that would be a separate process from yours. And also, you know, as a necessary fact, you know, even if it's approved, if town meeting were to not approve the license of the town-owned land, they wouldn't be able to go forward with the project in that part of the project area. And just to answer that question on September town meeting, it hasn't really been discussed in any way, shape, or form, but as a practical matter, that would not be presented at the special fall town meeting, any license involved in this expansion project. Not for any political reasons or anything like that. I think if anything, just logistically, it just would not be possible to have that be part of that. So depending on what happens with your proceedings, you know, it may or may not come up at the annual town meeting, but it definitely will not be on the September special town meeting.
Thank you, Attorney Pucci. And I'm going to say one more thing that's a little bit outside of our process, but I'm going to say it very succinctly for the benefit of the public. If this order of conditions is approved and the town meeting vote is obtained, the select board at that time still has the additional ability to put whatever additional requirements or conditions on that license that they see fit. But that is not our process, that is their process. So if anybody has questions, I would just direct you to town staff because they can answer this more in depth, but that's what we're looking at right now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. That answered my question very thoroughly. And the reason why I asked it was make a general statement that the necessity to have this done in a very timely manner is understandable, but it's not urgent in the sense that if you deliberate and take your time and go through like Mr. Rose has suggested, and you have been doing so far, I don't understand if the review by the law firm, it has to be in right away, as one of the members said. I mean, we have all the time in the world to go through this in a thorough manner, and I just wanted to make that point using that example of the vote at town meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Balkan. And though I appreciate some of your sentiment, I respectfully disagree with part of it in that it is absolutely true that we need to take the appropriate amount of time to deliberate robustly and get the order right. But it is certainly not the Conservation Commission's job to delay permitting processes more than they are necessary. So if we're waiting on additional information or we're waiting on legal review or we're deliberating through this process, I think we all understand that will take time, but it is fair and polite also to the applicant to make sure that we are moving through these steps and are moving towards some resolution. Thank you. Dr. Kriebel, would you wish to address the commission? Please introduce yourself for the record and then go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here. Mr. Chair, I have some slides to illustrate the talking points that I had. If you feel appropriate, I can share them.
Dr. Kriebel, are these slides that are new or they have been presented to the commission previously?
They have not been presented. I submitted them 2 meetings ago, and we did not have time to go through them then.
Thank you, Dr. Kriebel. I'll permit you to give a high-level brief overview of these slides, like 5 minutes or less. And Will, I'll direct you to do whatever you need to help Dr. Kriebel present, but I implore you please to just keep it succinct because we do have a lot to go through here.
Agree. It's okay if I'll share my screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So as we get started in here, I'll go very briefly. I'm David Kriebel. I'm a former professor at the Naval Academy, now working as a consultant representing the Greenhill family, and I've been working on this issue for several years at this point. I've had several previous submissions. I'll skip those. What I'll talk about today are the potential downdrift and impacts of the geotubes. And as I go, the basis of everything I've done are the data sets that have been collected by Woods Hole Group. This is just an example of a cross-section or slice of the beach down near the Green Hills property. And basically, the data set that I've been using consists of shoreline change. That's sort of represented by the blue arrow, tracking where the shoreline is over time, but also the volume change of the beach. So sort of between the red, the green, the blue, and the black, what that cross-sectional area or volume would be. And I'll note that it excludes the bluff, the way the Woods Hole Group computes their volume information. To make things a little more digestible, what I've done is I've defined an area around the geotubes. Just south of the geotubes is an area that we'll call the updrift section. Basically, the longshore flow of sand comes from that direction. And then north of the geotubes is a downdrift section where the sand is going to. The limits of these are not really clear. I've adopted some, but others could be adopted. The approach I've taken, first of all, I want to make it clear. There is no particular way that you can prove or disprove impacts. Given the volume of data and the situation, we really don't know what these impacts are. We cannot compare these impacts to what the beach might have been if the geotubes are never built. So we really don't know what the condition would have been. All we can do is look at what's happened in recent past and what's happening now. To reduce noise in the data, I think others have shown shoreline data. It's very noisy and changes a lot. I've done some averaging over these updrift and downdrift sections. And what I'll do today is to try to look for spatial changes, temporal changes, and any asymmetries that come in. Basically, in coastal engineering, if we get symmetric changes, it probably implies some process that's happening everywhere, unrelated in this case to geotubes. If we get asymmetric changes, it may indicate something is happening differently on one side than the other. So this is an example of shoreline data going back to the 1970s. And this is for all the transects in the area I've looked at. I think you get the idea that the area has been eroding and it is continuing to erode. If we look in the at the geotube section, we see basically the same kind of thing. The shoreline had been eroding, and that's in the blue dots. In the more recent time, after the geotubes were put in the red, it's still eroding at a relatively high rate. Updrift of the geotubes, and that is south of the geotubes, what we find is a bit of a change in that it had been eroding quite rapidly before the geotubes were installed, and it has shifted to a condition of stability and maybe a slight bit of an increase. On the other hand, downdrift of the geotubes, this would be to the north, we had a very slight erosion trend earlier that has shifted to a much stronger erosion trend since the geotubes went in with the red symbols. And relative to the Green Hills, this is one thing that has them concerned. That is that historically their property has been stable. It was even showing some accretion historically. After the time of the geotubes, it has shifted to a rather dramatic shoreline erosion. If we look at volume data, it's somewhat the same picture. If we look at all the data across the whole region, everything has been eroding before in blue and after the geotube installation. If we look on the updrift side, south of the geotubes, we see that it had been eroding volumetrically, and it has become much more stable and even gaining a little bit of sand. The geotube section similarly had been eroding in volume and now is gaining sand. And I'll point out here that in a previous slide, the geotube shoreline is eroding. In this slide, in red, the volume is increasing. That can only happen one way, and that is we're piling sand high on these geotubes, storing volume, but allowing the shoreline to continue to erode in front. But in terms of volume, if we look downdrift, north of the geotubes, we see the same pattern as before, slight erosion before the geotubes in blue, and much faster erosion now afterwards in red. And if we look at the transects around the Green Hills property, we see sort of the same thing. I might go back to this one. The erosion rate now, downdrift of the geotubes, is about 14,000 cubic yards per year. Recall that every place is eroding, so not all of this is due to the geotubes. But on the other hand, I'll note that, and I think others have noted, there is a large deficit in the annual mitigation sand placement on the order of over 8,000 cubic yards per year, and that certainly could account for a good bit of the change that we see.
Dr. Kriebel, sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to give you 60 more seconds to wrap it up because we got a lot to go through.
Thank you. The previous data ignored the bluff changes. This slide shows what's happened to the bluff. In a nutshell, there's been a very big change from bluff volumes. Geotubes have added bluff sand, much more erosion in the bluff on the downdrift or north side. So my general findings, the whole area is erosional. Certainly the geotubes aren't causing everything that we see, but we are seeing changes in time, changes in space that are suggesting that the geotubes are having an impact. And I'll also note that it also seems to indicate that the Coir terraces are having an impact. And I'll note that, maybe I'll slip this slide. If you look down on the system, both the geotubes in the center and one of the Coir terraces to the right extend and protrude quite far out onto the beach. And the way what I see in the data is that they're trapping some sand and preventing it from getting to the other side. So, Mr. Chair, I'll wrap up. These are my general conclusions. I think I've said most of these before, but I know that you're carefully considering order of conditions. I think these should at least raise an interesting questions in your mind about failure criteria and about the need for mitigation sand. So I'll encourage you to, in the last line, carefully consider these. Thank you. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kriebel. Can you please stop the screen share?
Yes. Thank you.
Do any other members of the public wish to comment? Chip, I see you, but I'm going to hold off on recognizing you for 1 minute, but I will come to you in a bit. Okay, seeing no. Do any members of the commission have any questions or comments related to what anybody from the public has said today? Okay, thank you. So before I recognize Chip Nyland, I will just say that we're also aware that the Conservation Commission received a packet submission from SPPF from Attorney Nyland's office. And Chip, I'm assuming you're going to do this anyways, but in addition to whatever else you might wish to say, if you could just go over the context of that, and then also allow you an opportunity that if there's any general updates or comments you would like to say, now would be your chance. And after that, we'll go back into deliberating the order of conditions. So good evening, Mr. Nyland. Please identify yourself and go ahead.
Good evening, Chip Nyland on behalf of the applicant, and thank you. I did have a couple of updates and reference or response to items raised in the public discussion, and then I'll be brief about what we submitted today. First, with respect to the issue of permits, we agree with you that the province of the Conservation Commission is not to determine property boundaries or property rights that are determined by others. So we agree that the license issue with the select board is separate and distinct and not a question of performance standards from the commission. Second, I'd like to say that last evening there was a discussion with the select board And if you recall, at the last meeting, there was a discussion about reaches and which were going to go first in terms of a sequence. And I believe that we have reached an agreement in terms of how that can proceed. Third, with respect to Mr. Rose's comments, I guess it is complicated for him because the way that I understand it, and I'm the lawyer, not the technical, we put it at a lower elevation than at grade, and we're talking about a horizontal distance and not vertical. So when we get to the walkable beach issue, I think we can address that question, because I think he stated things that are factually incorrect. With respect to whether select board, town meeting permit is required, we're going to leave that for town council and ourselves. If town meeting approval is required, then we will get it. And if it's not required, then we'll deal with the order of conditions. We would like to state with respect to Mr. Balkine's position that this isn't just a question of going on and on and on. We believe that we've presented a significant amount of information. The commission has been very patient, and we appreciate that what you've done in terms of letting us proceed. But we're really in a position we're going over conditions because we think that we're close to closing this order of conditions. Whether or not we're able to do work this year, which apparently it looks like it's going to be very, very difficult, but that doesn't mean that we want to slow down and get an order of conditions and get the right order of conditions. With respect to what I submitted to you, there were 3 documents. Number 1 was a cover letter from me to the commission, and just to identify what we were providing to you. We received, or we found on the website, revisions to the proposed draft order of conditions on Tuesday. So we want to make sure to respond to those. That's why you didn't get that until today. It took us a bit of time to respond to a number of those items. So we have provided that with what I call a markup or a red line of the order and the findings. And if you continue to go line by line or item by item, we'll participate to that extent. Second, what we did is we identified what we consider to be the key issues for proceeding, having to do with sequencing, having to do with this raising of having to get an amended order of conditions to go to phase 2, and other items having to do with monitoring, and also, most importantly, for imminent danger finding. And I will also say that the third part of that letter is I have requested formally a waiver in the event that the commission finds that some of the lots are not eligible or otherwise. We've asked a waiver because it's critical, as Dwight and others have told you, Dr. Duncan and others have told you, we can't have a segmented geotube. It defeats the purpose. It causes greater erosion and ultimately will result in damage to the geotubes and to the coastal bank that we're seeking to protect. So the worst thing that we can do is have a series of geotubes along this property. So if the commission can't arrive at an agreement in terms of the gap lots and all of those lots being eligible, which we believe they are based upon the information we've provided to you from the assessor, from the building department, and everyone else, then we want to make sure that the commission has the ability to grant a waiver if that's how it chooses. So I wanted to be brief. I appreciate the time. If there's anything else I can answer, but we understand you're going to go forward with the findings and the conditions, and we'll participate in that process.
Thank you, Attorney Nyland. I do have one question specifically related to one of your points, and then after that, I will allow anyone else from SPPF who wishes to weigh in to do so. So I appreciate you sending the information in today, and specifically the request for the waiver. And I see in the request, the specific performance standards that the waiver is trying to address, but I don't see a request for the specific waiver that is being referenced. And it's the onus of proof, the burden of proof is on the applicant to select a waiver and to indicate why that waiver would be, appropriate in this circumstance. For instance, if it's a long-term net benefit waiver that you're looking for, you would have to prove that. If it's a no adverse impact, no reasonable alternatives, you would have to prove that. So I understand that the letter just came in today, but if you could work to flesh out with your team a little bit more about why and how you think those waivers are relevant, we would appreciate it. Or you're also welcome to hold off into that process until the point that we determine either a waiver is required or not. But it's really the applicant's job to ask for which waiver they would like to be applied rather than the commission's job to do so. Thank you. Any other members of the commission have anything specifically related to Attorney Nyland's comments? Yes, Chip, if you'd like to respond, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, we've spent 8 months demonstrating why a waiver would be appropriate for all of those reasons included. If you want us to, again, summarize those and put that into writing, that's fine. But we've talked about meeting the performance standards, about no adverse impact. We've demonstrated to you, as I just briefly stated, the need to have an elongated and tied in set of geotubes rather than having segments. We all know what happens to seawalls or coastal engineering structures or any structures that are left by themselves and are not tied in. They're more susceptible to damage. They wind up damaging the coastal bank as well as the property. So, we feel very comfortable that we've provided all the reasons for the approval of the project. If you think we need to summarize what we've provided to you, we can do that, but we didn't think it was necessary because we think the administrative record is filled with that basis.
Thank you, Mr. Nyland, and it's not really what I think, but it's actually how the regulations are written. The regulations require those waiver requests to be in writing and to specifically meet the burden of proof. So I would specifically request as a chair that you do so. Thank you. Dr. Dunk, I'll recognize you. Please indicate who you are for the record and then proceed.
Yes, Dwight Dunk, principal with Epsilon Associates, representing SBPF. There's just two.
Sorry, you got to speak up a little bit.
Oh, sorry about that. Is that a little better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just 2 points. One, in response to Dr. Kriebel's points tonight, he had provided those comments in writing. We provided a memo to the commission that should be in your record, dated August 7. And just 3 or 4 bullet points there. One, we agree with him that showing cause and effect here is pretty much impossible. Number 2, this shoreline has been erosional. That's the reason for the project. And number 3, when you look at the data that he provided in terms of the trend lines and extend those trend lines back in time, one of the purposes of regression analysis is to look forward and back. We see that the data points also show that could be interpreted that erosion had started at the Green Hills property circa 2010, 2011, years before the geotubes were constructed. So I don't want to belabor the point. We provided it in writing, and that's not the purpose of tonight's hearing. But I just want to make sure that that response is in the record. And then number 2.
Thank you, Dr. Dunk. That response has been received and is in the record. It was sent to commissioners and included in the packet, so we do have that response.
Great, thank you. And then just relative to the waiver request, and again, not to belabor that point because Attorney Nyland, has provided that in writing. The fact is, when the purposes of a waiver is when a project cannot meet the performance standards. It's our opinion that the project does meet all of the performance standards, and the properties are eligible both relative to the pre-78 criteria and the imminent hazard. At the last hearing, Mr. Chair, you had mentioned a potential for a waiver. So we just wanted to have a waiver request in the record. As we indicated, in the event the commission does not agree with those two elements. And the request also identified the fact that as proposed, the project would not adversely affect the interests, the bylaw interests of this coastal bank being storm damage prevention, erosion, and flood control. But if we, as we go through this process, if there is a need to further refine that, that can be done. But as I said, it's our opinion that the project meets all the performance standards such that a waiver request would not be required, and that's why one was not requested up front. But we just didn't want to not be able to have that in the record and that request in front of the commission in case we need to go that route.
Thank you, Dr. Dunk. And if we, if the sense of the commission is that that waiver will be required, then at that point we will ask for more information, but we won't waste anyone's time until that decision has been made. Anyone else from SBPF wishing to weigh in, or the town as a co-applicant? Or if not, we will go back to deliberating on the findings and conditions. All right, so thank you, everybody. And I know this is a long and arduous process for everybody, but we are here to get these conditions right. And I'll just say one thing as a high-level overview, this is for everyone's benefit. I appreciate the letter that came in from SPPF and their attorney, Chip Nyland, and I think it's informative. But ultimately, applicants don't decide conditions, members of the public don't decide conditions, commissioners decide conditions, and we do so in a very rigorous way. It's our burden, it's our sworn duty, I should say, to make sure that projects are conditioned appropriately to minimize any impacts to the performance standards. So I'm going to ask you for your patience and your creativity here, because it will require a lot of going through and being very deliberate and being very in-depth. But unfortunately, that is our duty in this process. So thank you. So, yes, Linda, go ahead.
Jeff, that one you were working on in the office, is that one that I have access to right now, or is that something that's after the one I have up here?
Actually, just hold off on that for 1 second.
I have one up here, but I don't know which one this is.
So I was going to invite our staff to talk about the draft that we're working on, give a high-level overview of the changes since the last time and some of the items for discussion and deliberation, and then we can get back to the specifics. So Jeff, could you do that, please?
Sure. And I don't know, Will, did you want to pop that up on the screen?
Yes,
just for
please
people
do
to see? So it's the one that we distributed by email, and it is available on the website. So
Can
I
you
think,
just overview some of the big changes, and then we'll start back into the findings?
sure. So I'll just run through them. If people want, as we kind of run through here, on the last page, I did do kind of a quick changes for tonight that we kind of ran through everyone, and I can walk everyone through it. And then also kind of a couple decision points on that, a little bit of a change summary. We did all of the changes. I underlined just so people could see that it was changed. I know sometimes track changes gets kind of messy on these things. We didn't have a lot, so I put them in there. So just really quickly, on 20B, that was the one that originally had said reach one shall be constructed first at the end. I reworded that slightly to read that the commission finds that due to the buildings being closest to the top of the eroding bank and all buildings meeting the imminent danger criteria, that reach one shall be constructed first. I know there's been some talk around that. including last night's select board meeting, so we can discuss that further a little bit later. And then 24 and 25 were sent in by the chair, that the commission finds that the proposed geotextile tubes and core terraces are coastal engineering structures. That's pretty consistent, and I'm actually kind of embarrassed that we forgot to put that in there the first time. And then 25 was the statement that was referenced earlier, referencing that chapter 67 1E. I know that's not necessarily within the bylaw, but don't disagree that it's something that's nice to note for an approval that is outside of normal approval that needs to be obtained. To kind of continue, those were all of the changes to the findings specific. There were some changes to the conditions. I know we didn't go through the conditions last time. We just focused on the findings, but really quickly, just to kind of gloss through them, there was a change to condition 30 that spelled out a little bit more on how the mitigation material will be reviewed and make sure that it's compatible. And before I go farther, I also want to apologize too. The numbering had a inconsistency before. There was 2 starts at like condition 18. So we fixed all of the sequences, which messed up everyone's numbers, I know, but now they're all sequential, and we'll keep it that way going forward. Condition 32, we added some additional reporting for disposal of anything that was damaged or removed. I won't go through all of that. There's a new 40, which is very similar to the fill material, the fill condition that we've been putting on most orders for chemical testing and other contaminant testing. And then 41 for no vehicles or machinery was added. 47 is consistent with another one a little bit later talking about updating amounts for removal. And then to kind of get into the other decision points that you guys had kind of asked for on the last page, I didn't put them in because I didn't want to make it super confusing and have multiple points. Broke out a couple different options for imminent danger. They read pretty similar for lots, but there are 2 options. The first one. What number are you on now? Oh, sorry, I jumped down to imminent danger option 1. It's on
the last page, yeah.
The very last page. You guys had asked for a couple options there. So we broke out specifically which lots we're going to meet the definition that is in number 1. Option 1 has a specific distance, and that's what was provided in the notice of intent. Option 2 is a little bit more of a interpretive definition for imminent danger. I think it'd be good to have some discussion about both of those. And then above that on that same page, again, Seth suggested a different definition for walkable beach that I think would be good to discuss. I think looking at it, it seems to make a lot of sense, but again, it was new, and without cluttering up the above, I thought it would be nicer just to break it out. And then in the monitoring above, it was also suggested that in addition to that, to have some sort of real-time monitoring system to track erosion between the survey periods. And then there was a really interesting article about a university in the UK that's kind of doing a study on that. I apologize that that link got copied twice. But I would recommend people do it, but I think that would also be something that would be interesting for discussion by the commission. That's really it.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, Linda, go ahead.
Jeff, when you say some of these, because I know we have gap lots all over the place, when you say some of these do not meet the imminent danger criteria, would it be more appropriate to say currently do not meet?
So I think we should hold that question off until we discuss which type of decision point we want for imminent danger. Because
Well, either one of them. I mean, the word currently is what
I
I'm
think what
missing.
we have to do is decide how we want that to read, and then I personally have a lot of questions and comments about what's below in those languages. Anyways,
Option 1 and 2?
yeah.
Yeah. But that's just one, that's the only comment I have right now.
Thank you. So I think what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go all the way back to additional findings. We're going to discuss the 2 that were added, or the 1 that was edited and the 2 that were added. And we're going to try to get that part cleaned up. Then we're gonna make sure that no commissioners have any other findings that they want. And then we're gonna basically put this on pause. It's not gonna be closed. It's not gonna be the last time you can possibly talk about this, but we're gonna move on from the discussion at this point. We went through all of them, so we're gonna first be talking about 20B. And the new language is the commission finds that due to the buildings being the closest to the top of the eroding bank and all buildings meeting the imminent danger criteria, that each one shall be constructed first. So I think we should hold off on the imminent danger criteria because we haven't actually decided if they meet the imminent danger criteria or not. But just one question is, are you saying that all buildings in Reach 1 meet the imminent danger criteria?
That's what my brain was saying, but it may not have made it correct.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense. I think how it's written means that all buildings in the whole project area are in imminent danger, so. I don't even know if we need this part. I think we can just say, commission finds that due to the buildings being closest to the top of the eroding bank and in need of a resilience effort or some type of thing like that, most subject to coastal risk, something like that, that Reach 1 should be constructed first. Yes, go ahead.
Is this where we would allow them to do 2 and 3 at the same time, or is that in a different section?
The
1, 2, and 3 at the same time?
Vince, if you'd like to speak, you are welcome to, but just as a high-level overview, the applicant, or at least SPPF, is in their capacity as an applicant, has withdrawn that request based on the discussion at the select board meeting last night.
One question now.
Hold on, I'm going to recognize Mr. Murphy first.
Yes, thank you. And with the discussions last night, we did, the select board did discuss, we brought this up, we went through it. They wanted to go with how it was worded, how it was in the notice of intent, which is how it translated in here, because it is a direct pull from the NOI. But if the commission wanted to say something that Reach 3 and Reach 1 could be done simultaneously, that could be a good way of a compromise, and it would allow for both sides to attain what they need at the same time. But I would like language, something to the effect of at the same time would be necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Yes, Linda, go ahead.
I sat through that last night and took like 10 pages of notes for myself, because there's some interesting, had some really interesting slides. And that was where I was headed. Because you've got to fix 2 to work with 1, and 3 is attached to 2 on the south. And instead of, nobody's in favor of them just doing 2 and 3 without doing 1 also. So that's what I'm questioning in this section, if it would have something along the lines of what Vince said, that 1, 2, and 3 go, fix 2 and add 1 and 3 at the same time, or allow that flexibility in here, but 1 has to go, regardless of whether they do 2 and 3, but give them the option of doing 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. That's the language that I'm missing here.
Thank you, Linda. And I understand the point in theory, but I worry that that language will be relatively vague and we'll end up with a situation where, like one piece of dirt is moved on phase 1 and then the entire Reach 1 and then the entire reach of Reach 3 and 2 will be constructed. And it's possible to say, we worked on Reach 1. So, sorry, I mean, I'm not trying to
Well, however they want to
say
phrase it.
I'm not trying to say that the applicant has ill intentions, but it's just in a theoretical perspective of looking at this, we need to be very, very clear and ensure that the Reach 1, which is the town's highest priority for resilience, and the Conservation Commission's highest priority for coastal protection because of the performance standards of the protected interest in that area, definitely happens. So
But
thank you.
I don't want to preclude them from doing 2 and 3 at the same time, because they're all part of phase 1. So I don't know how the language would be phrased, but I don't want to preclude them from doing 2 and 3 at the same time.
Thank you, Linda, and we hear your point. I'm going to allow the representatives from SBPF, either Dr. Dunk or Meredith Moldenhauer, whichever order you'd like to speak in, to go ahead. And then we're going to get some public comment here as well.
Meredith, if you don't mind, I'll just go first. Just one point relative to these sections going first, 1, 2, and 3. There is special condition 48 where the applicant shall provide a final construction methodology in sequence to the commission. So in terms of a condition that identifies that number 1 is a priority, number 1 going, at the same time as 2 and 3 up in this condition, and then it is captured again in 48 where the commission can review that sequence prior to construction and weigh in on it at that time to avoid some of I think that would take care of some of the concerns that I hear being voiced about Reach 1 versus Reach 3.
Thank you, Dr. Dunk. Meredith Moldenhauer, I'll recognize you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I just wanted to echo kind of what Dr. Dunk said, and I wanted to thank Mr. Murphy for identifying that we had obviously presented a change, but we are obviously supportive of the language of having it being done simultaneous, and we think that that would address the needs and also provide clarity that is needed. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moldenhauer. Joe Plandowski, go ahead.
I looked at the distance from the structure to the bank edge. For example, in Reach 2. Joe, real quick, your microphone. There you go. In Reach 2, there are 3 structures, 3 lots, 2 feet, 12 feet, and 13 feet from bank's edge. In Reach 1, the distances are 14, 22, and 32. I mean, it's almost a toss-up because they're pretty close, whether you do 2 or 1 first. But if I had a choice to pick which one, I'd do 2 first.
So thank you, Mr. Plandowski. Most of Reach 2, I'll concede, not all of Reach 2, but most of Reach 2 is currently protected by the existing geotube structure. So although what you're saying is true, those properties you're referencing are already being protected. Other commissioners, do people have thoughts on this? Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly, I watched last night's select board meeting as well, and it was very clear what SBPF was asking for and where the select board came in unanimously. I'm open-minded to 1 through 3. I would say that if we, to your concern, if we moved a little dirt around in 1 and just worked on 3, it's a deeper dive, but maybe you have to set some parameters around progress dates or feet, or I'm kind of just reaching for it as I go, but certainly number 1 is the priority as defined by imminent danger.
Thank you, Mike. And without getting really complicated in this permit, the types of things that you're talking about doing are theoretically possible, but they're going to be so onerous on the commission staff, and the applicants that it's just, I don't think it's worthwhile. Jeff, go ahead.
So I think if I may, and given everyone's comments and kind of looking at this the way it's written, is I think this one is giving clear instructions that Reach 1 needs to be constructed first. I don't think it precludes from simultaneous construction as long as Reach 1 is included in that simultaneous construction. And then the later condition 48, where they have to bring in the final construction plan and sequencing, it's still subject to commission approval. So I think you can reference that and say, well, the construction plan that's coming in doesn't include that Reach 1 is first. So I think it's not saying you can't, it's just saying that if you're going to do something first, this has to be included. And if they can sequence it and demonstrate that they can operationalize that in the same way and meet the requirements of this commission and the select board, I think that's their challenge to do, and certainly we can do it. And I think there's a certain amount of, integrity that comes with not, well, we moved a cubic yard of material to the north, so we're going to count that, and then we're going to construct 4 layers of tubes, wherever else it is. I think in the construction plan that will need further approval from the commission, that can be memorialized by both parties.
Thank you. Before you go, Linda, is anyone else who hasn't spoken yet wish to weigh in on this? Nope. Okay, Linda, go ahead.
It's to their benefit, since they've talked a lot about funding and lack thereof, to do it all at one time, because it's 3,660 feet in 3, 1,332 and 1,382 and 2, and only 400 feet in 1. 160 of it, according to them last night, was going to be covered by fixing 2 and going up to attach to it. My understanding, it takes 3 months, if not longer, to order all the material. So if they only order all the material for 3 and sand for 2, they're never going to get 1 done. So that's why when they have to bring in the final construction methodology, Jeff can make sure that they've ordered enough for all 3. And that's another way to control it.
Thank you. I think the language as written is very clear and provides enough flexibility already, but would any members of the public wish to weigh in here? Yes, please come up to the microphone and record or reference who you are for the record.
Thank you, RJ Turcott, on behalf of the Nantucket Land and Water Council. This, I think, this conversation is sort of illustrating some of the problems with the phasing of this notice of intent. We're talking about allowing 2 reaches to go at the same time. The first one makes sense. It's the one that's in most jeopardy. The one south of the geotubes, though, it's my understanding from the information that's been submitted that if you were to go with your definition of imminent danger at 40 feet, only one of those lots, the one directly south of the geotubes, is actually in imminent danger. So legally, they cannot build that until they're in imminent danger. Now, we talked earlier about how they're going to need an annual town meeting vote before they can put anything on the ground. So maybe there's something you can write into the permit that says if you get that, you get everything in order, and by the time it's time to build Reach 1, Reach 3, those properties are actually in imminent danger. Perhaps then they can go concurrently, but as of right now, legally, according to the Conservation Commission's own language and DEP's language, which we submitted at the meeting 2 weeks ago, they cannot proceed at the same time because they're not in imminent danger. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll determine if it's in imminent danger or not later in this hearing, but Ms. Moldenhauer, please go ahead.
I was just going to provide some,
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
Chair.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to provide just some practical perspective. Obviously, as we said last night, we will have to fundraise for Reach 1. We will obviously then not conduct any work until we have obtained all of the necessary funding to construct Reach 1, 2, and 3. And so obviously any concerns about, partial construction, I think are unnecessary, because at the end of the day, once we've obtained all of the necessary funding, we'll then move forward. It just means no work can be done either on any of the project until we've obtained that funding. But we understand that obviously I think the proposed language for allowing them to go simultaneous and that understanding would obviously be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Jeff, go ahead.
I just wanted, just for clarity, and if we need to clarify it further within the order, I don't believe it's staff's intention for any of those approvable steps, whether it's construction methodology or any of those, to be staff approval. That would be commission approval.
Thank you. So I think we need a little bit of wordsmithing of this, but I think we're all on the same page of how we want it to proceed. So with that said, we're going to go on into discussing the new findings that were added, 24 and 25. And then we're going to, I think, jump to a discussion of how we want to define imminent danger, because that sort of seems to be a sticking point for this whole order. And I think we need to get it out of the way before we just keep running our head against the same issue. So number 24 is the commission finds that the proposed geotextile tubes and coir terraces are coastal engineering structures. Does anyone have any concerns with that? Joe, go ahead.
Yes, I do. I found a Massachusetts Conservation Commission document on core roles. And it's clear when you read through this document that it's not a CES. And the question I have is, are we making this that much more tougher for this project by including it as a CES?
Thank you, Mr. Plandowski. Whether it's a CES or not, I don't think it really changes a lot of the discussion about how difficult it is to approve. I will say though, and this is going to be very brief because it's in a different open order. This is the confusing part. But in SE 48 3759, that's the other project proposed for the geotextile, or not geotextile, coir terraces. The commission had a discussion about whether we thought those were to be coastal engineering structures or not. And we pretty specifically said that we thought they were coastal engineering structures under the Nantucket local regulations definition. To be fair, we have not actually issued that permit yet, so it's not an official declaration, but it was a sense of the commission at the time that they definitely meet the requirements under the Nantucket regulations as a coastal engineering structure. Yes, Linda, go ahead.
I think it came up last night. It was a separate hearing last night, right after the other one. And I think it came up on emergency basis. If it is on town land, going to town meeting. If it's not a CES, then it didn't need town meeting. And if you want to clarify that with George, I think that came up at the very end of that
So
discussion.
we'll talk about that in the next finding, but that is
But that
factually.
takes it back here.
That is factually incorrect. Whether the project proposed is a CES or not doesn't change what is written in chapter 67 1E. Specifically in that chapter, it talks about coastal protection.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about coastal engineering. It even specifically says hard and soft structures and all other types of,
I saw that.
even if you were gonna just go and do beach nourishment or dune nourishment by just dumping sand, that would still require you to get a license
Because it's soft.
under the chapter 67 1E.
Well, it should,
Linda, hold on. Jeff, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Seth's description is pretty good. And I know George just raised his hand too. The last section where it requires the town meeting vote simply just states that it needs to be something that's looking to control erosion. So it doesn't require a finding by the commission that it's a CES or to meet that. It's simply, if it's a project on town-owned land to control erosion that requires a license, then it requires a town meeting vote.
Attorney Pucci, would you wish to elaborate?
Yeah, I do. I just want to note, Seth, that you're exactly correct in my opinion. So
Thank you.
I have nothing further to add other than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
but should we state it here
Where is here? Sorry.
in 24? And include both of them if we haven't really made a finding on the coir, because that's a separate thing going on for us?
Well,
Should they both be in this order of
A
conditions?
couple weeks ago at a hearing, we pretty much said that coir terraces are
I know,
coastal
we
engineering
talked about it,
structures.
yeah.
So we should just formalize that. But Mr. Murphy, go ahead and speak.
I see Seth's point, and I see the relevance of keeping core terrace in because it's relevant to the phase 2 part where there is core.
Okay. So are all members of the commission willing to accept this finding?
Okay.
Yes. Anyone in the public wishing to speak? Okay. Then we'll go on to 25, which we already discussed already, and we've discussed it at other points in this hearing as well. But this finding is very much just saying that the Conservation Commission acknowledges that this other requirement exists.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that we have authority over this chapter. It doesn't say that we are involved in the leasing or licensing. It just simply, for the applicants and the public's benefit, indicating that this requirement of the town code exists. So, staff, do you have anything else to add on that?
No.
Okay.
So not even the words may be subject, or we're making a statement that it is subject? Does that matter?
Mr. Pucci, in his authority last night as town council, pretty specifically said that it does apply. Mr. Pucci, though, I'll give you the opportunity here to clarify if you would like.
Yeah, are we talking about whether, what part? I have it.
This
I'm
this
looking.
is finding 25 saying that the project, in order to proceed,
Yeah.
is subject to the requirements of Chapter 67 1E.
I think that that's correct. And you're right, it's consistent with what I said to the select board last night. And it goes with you're reading subsection E exactly correctly. It's very broad. So it doesn't matter what term of art you use. It that language is very broad. So if it's a project for, erosion control purposes, no matter what you want to label it as, the license or the lease for the town-owned portion of the project area has got to be approved by town meeting. So I believe that your proposed condition is exactly correct.
Thank you. And I'll just say there's a very specific reason why this language is in additional findings and not in conditions. If it was in conditions, it would compel the applicant to get that town meeting approval before the project proceed. This, in findings, all we're saying is that this exists and it's outside of our process, but it exists.
Beware.
Yeah, and I should clarify, I meant finding.
Thank
25, the finding.
Yeah.
Mr. Nyland, would you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. I think you should put a period at the end of for coastal protection purposes. You are not the zoning board, and you're not the authority that determines whether or not something's subject to the requirements of the Nantucket Code. You haven't done that previously. We've talked about where your lane is. It clearly is a project that encompasses use of town-owned coastal land, but it should end with for coastal protection purposes. The regulation is what it says. The law is what it says. There's really no reason I believe that it's redundant. It doesn't belong there, and it gives an impression that, we have to go through a proposal that's not, we don't have to go through that with this Conservation Commission. That's between us and the zoning board and anybody else that's enforcing that provision, which is not the commission.
That's what concerns me.
Hold on, it's not your turn. Thank you, Mr. Nyland, and I'm going to ask a question of the staff at this point, but it's my understanding that this is not unprecedented in that in other cases when other permitting requirements exist that are outside of our permitting process, we have and are able to call them out. Is that true?
Yeah, we've done that before. Absolutely.
That's why.
Yeah, and I wanted to add
Yes.
too.
Go ahead,
I
Mr.
wanted
Pucci.
to add to it, the risk of disagreeing with Chip, because I really respect his opinions in this area. But as you said, Seth, I see these types of findings in orders all the time, and not just in findings, but also in conditions where a commission will note other regulatory requirements. Not that they have jurisdiction over it,
Defer,
but they'll reference it in there so that when somebody's reading it and they're curious, they can kind of see it in one document. And often, like a stormwater management permit under a local regulation, you'll often see those types of regulatory requirements referenced in a local order of conditions, even though that particular commission doesn't have jurisdiction. They sort of identify other local regulations and controls and requirements that may be applicable to a particular project.
what
So I
you said.
don't, I don't think it's crucial that you have it in there, but I certainly don't think there's anything illegal or improper of noting that in your findings. And I also find it factually correct.
Thank you, Attorney Pucci, and I think it is good to keep in for the benefit of the public and the applicant. So unless anyone has any specific concerns, we're going to move on. But yes, Jeff,
Just
go ahead.
real,
and Linda,
real
go ahead.
quickly, just for clarity, for those who don't read the standard pages in the orders of conditions, because we don't often look at those here, there's a very specific one in both the Town of Nantucket standard conditions and the state-issued order of conditions. That's a condition that explicitly does exactly what this finding does, where it says, the applicant shall obtain all other necessary permits from, and it lists as examples, and it says, as an example, but not limited to, and it lists them out. This, I think, is extremely appropriate in the sense that this is not a normal, in the normal list of, zoning, health, HDC, whatever it would be in. I think it's extremely informative for the public and for the applicant that there is an accessory step that will probably be needed for the project to go forward.
This is
Thank
making-
you. Linda, go ahead, and then we're going to move
All
on.
right, this is making my point. You said probably. George said maybe. That's what I'm missing. And all I'm asking is to vis-à-vis what you just said and what George just said, and George knows how long, 40 some odd years I've been with zoning. I would rather leave it in, but may be subject to the requirements of the town of Nantucket, so forth and so on, rather than we telling you, too bad, so sad. Because both of you have used that qualifying language, and I'd rather have it may be subject to the requirements. That's all I'm asking, is maybe.
No, it is
I'll clarify, it is
definitely
100% subject to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but somebody reading it may not understand that.
Okay, let's move on. So I'm going to give commissioners a final chance. I sent in some additional findings to staff that I thought would be relevant. I don't know if anyone else did, but does any commissioners at this point have any other findings that they think are critical to add?
In addition to what you already put in?
Yes. And if not, we're gonna sort of bring the finding section to a temporary terminus here. Yes, make it quick, please.
So sorry, RJ again. Quick question. We didn't really get to 22 at the last meeting. Are we going to go back to that at like a future meeting or at this one or? Because we submitted a letter specific to it that I have not spoken to.
As much as I hate to say this, we did not really discuss 22. 22 is the commission finds that all nourishment shall be done in compliance with the adaptive sand management strategy as proposed by the applicants. Mr. Turcott, I'll provide you a brief amount of time to discuss what your point is, and then we'll see if the commission wants to take up that finding or not.
Okay, thank you very much. So in regard to the adaptive sand management strategy, basically the letter that we submitted at LWC and our engineering consultant, Trey Ruthven, who is on the call if anyone has any questions for him, but we submitted that it is the number 22 cubic yards per linear foot per year annually is an important number, and it's a number that was averaged out from several agencies, including SPPF consultants from 2012 onward, and it is a number that falls into, whether you agree with it or not, the previous permit being in a deficit. And that deficit, if this commission allows those geotubes that are out there to stay on the ground, you had an attorney here that represented the neighbors downdrift, and you've already been sued once by that neighbor. You need to find a way to make that deficit up for that permit, whether you agree with that number or not. That number is what was written into the permit, and this is one of the biggest and most visible projects on this entire island. I think it is the most, and if you allow them to proceed with leaving those geotubes on the ground without making up that sand deficit, not only are you opening yourself up to another lawsuit as a commission, but you are also pointing out to every other applicant that they can sign a permit and then say, no, you know what, we don't agree with that number, we're not going to do it. So it's critical for you to have that conversation over what exactly the volume should be And we think the volume is credible and is important, especially considering that there is continuing erosion downdrift, and also to address the deficit, because the deficit has to be made up. Judge Gilday also said, you need to make that up in one way or another. When the removal order was being considered and upheld, it was thought that those geotubes would be cut open and that sand would contribute downdrift, but that hasn't happened. So it's a conversation that needs to happen. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Turcott, and I'm going to ask the staff to help us out with the second part of your question related to the nourishment stand required under SC 48, 28, 24, because we do have a specific condition in the permit as drafted at this point, not the finding. So Jeff, can you talk about that? And then we'll talk about the other piece after that.
Sure. So just to kind of jump ahead, that condition 49 reads pretty clearly that the applicant shall provide a plan for commission approval to supply all nourishment sand not provided under SC 48, 28, 24, following those nourishment requirements to date of this order of conditions. So maybe it's not as clear as it could be, but I think the intent of that condition is to say there's an amount that was owed under SC 48, 28, 24. We know what was delivered. We know what was missing. We know what should be there to date. You need a plan to supply all of that before you can start construction that the commission approves. So,
Thank you. Yes, Linda, go ahead.
There was some sentiment that the amount that was required under the previous one was set up to fail. If we determine how that amount was not necessary and some other amount is necessary and reasonable and doable and will provide the nourishment that we need, as well as to the new sections, how do we get there? Through you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff?
So I'm going to intercede here because I'm just going to acknowledge too that in the submission from Attorney Nyland today, the sand nourishment plan to deal with the lack of nourishment in 28, 24 to make up for that deficit, SPPF in their letter today already indicated that they would submit that plan and they're going to submit that plan. So I don't even really know what the discussion on that is. The applicant's willing to do that and has already said they'll do that, so. It's under 49, yeah. Jeff, go ahead.
all right. So for hopes to not be controversial, and I know there'll be some disagreement on this, there was a permitted requirement under SC 48, 28, 24. That order is no longer active, but that requirement and that amount was set. There was ample opportunity to amend and change that, and it was not. I think it's been the practice of the commission that that was the permitted amount, and that's the amount that is owed, even if now, looking at further data, you might change that going forward, but the amount in the past is the amount in the past.
So
you
to
know?
be clarified through you, Mr. Chairman, the reach 1 and 3, we may find a different amount.
Yes.
And we have that
Correct.
flexibility,
Yes.
so we're
Right.
not going to carry
Is
on.
I look at it, and not to interrupt, but it's a little like refinancing your mortgage, right? You're going to change your payment, but what you paid up to that date, you don't get to go back and revisit. It's what you owed for that time.
That's what I need
So
clarification.
I'm going to
on.
reference Mr. Nyland, Attorney Nyland, at this point. Because I think he wants to weigh in on this.
Thank you. So yes, we're talking about two different matters in terms of sand nourishment. We, to address the deficit question, yes, the order of conditions set a number, which we've said was rather arbitrary. And that order of conditions has expired. As a result of this draft order, it wasn't today, actually, Mr. Chairman, it was previously, we provided a nourishment plan with specific numbers. We went through the amount that would be contributed if the coastal bank was contributing sediment to the littoral process and came up with a number that we would be placing on the geotubes and on the beach as part of the process. So we acknowledge that. what number 22 references is going forward, which is coming up with a number that we think is correct to make sure that we are contributing to the littoral process going further and going on from now. So
Yeah.
we're talking about two different ones, and I just did want you to know that there is a sand nourishment plan that's in front of the commission that was submitted that has actual numbers.
Thank you. Yes, we have it. And I agree, we're talking about two different things. So it sounds like the issue with the making up of the required mitigation sand for the past permit that was not done, we have clarity on that. What we now need to do is, and I don't know if we're going to finish this discussion today, honestly, but we now need to have a discussion about whether members of the commission feel that the adaptive sand management program that is in the notice of intent and in various other letters and in verbal testimony of the applicants is correct for the project going forward. And just, I think I said this last time, but just for everyone's benefit, it's a different sand nourishment protocol than was in the prior permit. It has the same initial number of building the template up to 22 cubic yards per linear foot, but it has different annual requirements and different trigger system for placing sand on in the future. If people feel that what the applicant has submitted is a reasonable way to move forward in that it protects, or that it's done in accordance with the performance standards to protect the interest that we protect, then we can accept that. If people feel like it is not sufficient and that we need to have a different number used or a different nourishment program used, then we need to have a discussion. And I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion tonight, but I just want everyone to raise their hands if they think they at least want to discuss this further. So if you want to discuss this further, just raise your hand.
Just quick.
Go ahead.
I think based on what's further down, 48 or 49, I think we still have control over it. So I think what your statement is, I agree with your statement that we have enough because we still have control over it and we still have to make a decision whether it's reasonable or not.
Okay.
Under the way it's written right now. So I think we're covering ourselves.
All right, so I think we're going to put a small asterisk in 22 and at some point revisit the sand nourishment plan. But for now, we're going to go to the discussion of imminent danger. And then I think with respect to everyone's time today, we're going to look to continue after that discussion.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Would it, for discussion for 22, would it be helpful if we did kind of what we did for imminent danger and tried to bulk that out a little bit more for you guys for a different discussion?
Yes, I mean, from a logical perspective, there is accepting what's in the NOI. There is trying to continue the past number that was used for the new project, or there's some where in between of that. And I think we should have those laid out and reasons for them discussed at a future meeting.
Right, we'll
It's in here
detail
10
that out then.
times, according to my little thing here.
Okay. So imminent danger, and I'm going to qualify this by saying I think we should discuss just what's in number one of these options to begin, because that's really what the definition is. And then once we decide what definition we want, we can figure out how it actually applies to this permit. But it's up to us just to talk about the number ones. So number one in option one is a clear linear-based definition of less than 40 feet of the eroded coastal bank to a building. Number two, as Jeff said before, is a subjective finding that I think going to be regulatorily deficient and sounds a little bit arbitrary to me, but we'll see how other commissioners weigh in. Linda, go ahead.
I know that staff prefers one. As you said, it's more in line with actually what the law says. And if something happens and somebody loses 20 feet, they can come back in here and we'll deal with it. But I think, for clarity, option one is probably the best way to go for our purposes. And I do bleeding heart liberal from the 60s and 70s. Option two is where my heart is, but I think one is where we need to go.
Okay. Joe, would you like to speak?
Yeah, option one is what I would favor. Option two would mean we'd be sitting around arguing day after day of what's going on. It's just not worth the effort to do that.
Yes, Mike, go ahead.
As I hope I indicated in the last meeting, option one is good for me. It sets a boundary that everybody can understand and work from.
Tim?
Yeah, I agree.
And I also favor option one. I think it's clear and specific and in line with both what the applicant had originally proposed and past history on the site. So, Dr. Dunk, I'll reference you, or I'll let you speak, but it does seem like the commission's made up its mind on this.
Yes, no, there's just 2 points on this option one that I want to make clear, that lots 63 and 64 are less than 40 feet and they're fronted by an eroding coastal bank. So I think those should be moved up to from number 3 to number 2, as they are 32 and 34 feet respectively for 63 and 64, 63 and 65.
Yeah, thank you. I think we do have what's, here in number 2 through 5, but that hasn't really been reviewed by the commission, and we do need to go through all these properties and make sure that they fall into the right spot.
Correct. In number 2, these offsets are based on I believe it was a 2021 aerial photo, so it in LiDAR, where the commission is requiring updated plans and surveys as this moves forward. That I think one of the commission members commented something about as presently in the notice of intent or something like that, that these offsets can be, I think should be updated when those plans are done, because specifically I look at lot number 69 in 2021, it was shown to be 41 feet offset. And we know that in front of 79, they lost 18 feet of the Coyer Terrace, last January. So it's a dynamic system. And if we have to provide updated drawings and plans, I think that the offset should be allowed to be updated and revisited going forward in time as well.
Thank you, Dr. Dunk. And this is why many meetings ago, I had originally requested that we do receive updated plans prior to the issuance of a order of conditions, because it affects the eligibility of lots on site. I still think we would need an additional final plan, because I hear what everyone from SPPF is saying, that you want your final plan to be as true to existing conditions as possible. But we're trying to base this decision on 3-year-old data. It's possible that some of these properties have eroded significantly, and it's also possible that some of them may have accreted. So we need to, I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. We do need to have I think it would behoove the commission to have a updated plan set to work off of, so that we get actually this declaration of what lots qualify right. Thank you. Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
If I may, just to clarify how we compiled this list of distances, we used a table within the notice of intent and pretty much used the distances and whether the applicants identified the ability for a house to be relocated on the lot. So looking specifically at like 65 on that table where it said, could building be relocated, it was marked yes. So we didn't go through and like cherry pick out lots, is we used, like we always do, the data provided in the notice of intent and went through the tables and the information provided to do that. So if people don't like the numbers on there, I'm just going to be really blunt. Provide current data. It's that simple.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. So I think it's, up to the applicant if they wish to submit additional application or additional information, whether that be updated survey information, updated LiDAR information, whatever it is. This process is still open, this hearing is still open. You have the right and the ability to do that if you so wish. Mr. Nyland, would you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, the reason that we introduced a different way to measure this having to do with 2 storms was our concern, as Dwight and Gordon have talked about, the dynamics. So I don't have an answer here, but I'd like to have the opportunity to provide, submission while this order of conditions is open, so that if there's a property that is not now presently within that 40 feet, or the house, excuse me, the building that meets the pre-78, but not within 40 feet, that we would have an ability to present that so that building would be protected as well without having to spend 8 months to go through a process to have it protected.
Thank you, Mr. Nyland, and I can assure you that this process is open and that you can submit that, and we won't close the hearing until we have that from you. So I think we should probably hold off on the rest of the discussion at this point, because it seems like the applicant wishes to submit additional information, and it doesn't really make sense to go through all the properties that might be in imminent danger, might not be in imminent danger, might contain an eroding coastal bank, or might be a gap lot until we get the updated survey. So I would just say that if the applicant really wishes to do that, that we should allow them to do that, and that we should continue this hearing until we have that information. I am supposed to, yes, Dr. Dunk, go ahead.
Yes, maybe to be clear, what I was stating was my initial comment was not that we needed to submit an updated survey now, but that as part of the order, one of the conditions calls for updated plans prior to construction. And when those updated surveys and plans are done, that was when the evaluation, any reevaluation of the 40-foot offset would be done. Because again, LiDAR might be 1 year old at this point. So I think that was my point, not that we would provide a new survey during this hearing, but that as that condition of new survey and plans allow for this evaluation to be redone at that time.
Thank you, Dr. Dunk. We can certainly take that into account, but in the absence of a new survey, we'll have to use the information available to us. So in that case, we're going to use what's in the notice of intent. So in that case, we will proceed. So number 2 in this imminent danger classification talks about which properties contain a building. You're not. Yeah, there we go. Contain a building that is in imminent danger and qualify for a coastal engineering structure. Staff has said that they've reviewed the notice of intent and they think that, or that it's their professional opinion that these lots are encapsulated under that section. Is that correct?
Correct. Just to give my reference to, Table 2 in the notice of intent does a really great job where it has categories like distance to the top of the coastal bank, and then whether it's eroding or not, and then there's things like available space on site to relocate house, and in some cases they provide distances, and we looked at those and then applied the 40 feet with the eroding coastal bank without the possibility to relocate to then create that list.
Thank you. Thank you. And then in number 3, it's similarly looking at which properties contain structures that don't meet the imminent danger criteria. And this is going to get into a little bit more complexity later in the hearing. Yeah, it's up there. Option 1. This is going to get into a little bit more complexity later in the hearing, but I'm going to quickly reference the performance standard number 1 for coastal banks. And I think I've read it a million times in hearings before, so I'll do my best to summarize. But this section talks about protecting pre-78 structures from imminent danger, and those structures may only be permitted if that structure has not been substantially improved, or it only can be permitted if it was built prior to 1978 and it has not been substantially improved. And there's an additional section in this item that talks about alternatives, essentially. And it says that the applicant must essentially prove that there's no other environmentally friendly, better way to mitigate the structure from imminent danger. In addition, it specifically calls out moving those threatened structures. And so the applicant has to prove that they've met all of those requirements in order for the lots to actually qualify. So in number 3, it's essentially saying that these lots do not qualify unless they are subject to a waiver. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Linda, go ahead.
Well, 8179 in this section, 77, 73, 75 have all already been moved back by, because I did several of them by variance at the ZBA. So they can't go back any further. How is that being taken into account? Just because they moved back, they have a little bit, just about 40 feet left from where they used to live. All that was taken into account in that particular section, because as I said, I worked on every one of these at the ZBA to move them back to 0, or as close as I could get them to 0. And so the bank is just, the bank is back to where the house used to be. So how does that impact their ability to do anything else? They're already back at 0.
Thank you, and we'll let Jeff answer that.
Sure. So the short answer to that, and I'll just run through a couple of those really quickly. Again, referencing table 2 in the chart provided, the distance listed to 81 is 56 feet, 79 is 46 feet, 77 is 71. So they've relocated, but the distance is outside of 40 feet, so they're not in imminent danger. So
that's a different category than those that can move back but haven't moved back.
correct.
These guys have already done everything they can, so that's a different category, so the thing's coming back. 'Cause
Correct.
every one of these was where they used to live is thin air.
Yeah, and I think that's why there's so many separate categories here,
Yeah.
is it's trying to distinguish those because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of
I just want
classification.
to make sure that we sort of took that into account.
And then in number 4, now we're talking about properties that do not contain an eroding coastal bank. And so these are not able to have a coastal engineering structure in front of them at all because there's no eroding coastal bank. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then number 5, the juicy one. So number 5 talks about the idea of protecting continuous shoreline for the reasons that the applicant has stated that they think is important. And their presentation talks about how they think it's important to have all these lots included so that there's no holes or breakages in the coastal protection system that may otherwise cause impacts to where the coastal protection system is. And I think their point is well understood and well taken, but I think there's some regulatory details that we actually need to determine here. The first is that gap lots don't have a definition under the Wetlands Protection Act or the Nantucket local regulations. Gap lots don't really even have a long history of case law or permitting history around them, except for a few cases that the applicant has pointed to where some of them have been approved, and a few cases that the applicant and his commission has pointed to where some of them have not been approved. So the idea that these structures somehow qualify by being a gap lot, I think that's a really bad permitting precedent. I think that if we want to have those structures included, then we should attempt to apply a waiver to those properties, but not go down the line of trying to decide whether a gap lot can be approved or not, because that is arbitrary. And I think it's up to us to specifically say, it's clear that these properties definitely qualify. It's clear that these other properties definitely do not qualify. And in order to qualify, they need these waivers. And let's go through the waivers that exist to try to see if any of them are reasonable and any of them could be granted to this project. That seems like a regulatory, reasonable way to move forward. Yes, Linda, go ahead.
What's interesting about some of these lots in the middle of this group, 85, 87, and 91 are the vacant lots that we moved the houses out of there. So 2 across the street and 1 all the way to Monomoy. So those meet the definition of gap lots, but that's also where the erosion is pretty close to the road. So I agree with you. If waivers are the best way for us to regulatory do it, I'm okay with that. I'm okay if we don't. But I take your advice that doing it by waiver is cleaner and better to do it that way.
Yeah, and thank you. And I know the applicant and their counsel and some of their representatives have made their position clear that gap lots have a history of being allowed. And they've made it clear that even in this actual same contiguous area that we're talking about, there was some history of them being allowed by DEP, but never by this commission. I'll just say, though, that none of those orders ever became final. And I don't want us to get into the place where we're issuing a order that's going to be challenged because it's not specific. I want us to make sure that we clearly define what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. And if it doesn't qualify, can it be wavered? And if it can be wavered, how it can be wavered. So Mr. Murphy, go ahead.
Thank you very kindly, Chair. So from the town's point of view, this is a risk reduction exercise. And what the town would also like to see is not to have gap lots also protected and not have any break in the continuation down the coastal bank. It's probably worth pointing out that some of these numbers here in point 5, 87, 91, and 101 are currently behind the existing geotubes. So that is also the case. And for the remainder, to have gaps in areas, particularly up in the north part in Reach 1, that would defeat the purpose of what we were discussing earlier in some cases. But I don't mind at all your discussion about a waiver. A waiver seems like a perfectly reasonable and secure way to move forward if the commission will so allow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. And I am not trying to in any way say that somehow having continuous linear coverage is nonsensical. I'm just saying we need to specifically hold ourselves to the actual regulatory standard and make sure that we're permitting projects based on that standard, because if we're not doing that, we're being arbitrary, and that's when bad decisions happen. So thank you. Dr. Dunk, go ahead.
Yes. The item where you have the 40 feet did not also include the 65 feet that had previously been identified for the infrastructure for the road. And some of the lots that you've identified as gap lots, they are vacant lots that where the road is less than 65 feet from the top of the coastal bank. And therefore, in terms of the bylaw allows CES to protect infrastructure and structures. It's more lenient than the Wetlands Protection Act regulations of buildings. And therefore, those quote unquote gap lots that are vacant lots are there protecting the road, were included to protect the road, the infrastructure pursuant to the bylaw definitions and regulations and that 65-foot setback that had previously been identified for public infrastructure.
Thank you, Dr. Dunk. And we did have this discussion at the last meeting. And although I do agree with you in theory on what the language of the regulations under the local bylaws say, there is an issue where, from a legal perspective, we cannot promulgate regulations that are less stringent than the Wetland Protection Act. And although this has never gone to a court and doesn't have any case law associated with it, it was the opinion of the commission at the time that because infrastructure is not protected under the Wetlands Protection Act, that basing our definition on infrastructure in this permit would be a bad regulatory standard. That was a decision to base the imminent danger strictly on the distance to buildings. Thank you.
Your bylaw has been enacted and supported by the Secretary of State. So that would suggest that your bylaw is a legal bylaw.
Thank you. I appreciate your opinion. So I think it's pretty clear on the commission's behalf on how we want to proceed with imminent danger, except for number 5. So I'm going to ask Jeff and Will and as staff to look back into that and get some ideas together about that and potential waiver situations. And then I think we should continue this hearing because we've been at it for 2 hours at this point.
No, that's certainly doable. That's really helpful feedback, by the way.
Yes, Mr. Miserelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for my own clarification, well, let me just say, I think we all agree that a continuous structure is needed. Is on the waiver question, which again sounds like the right way to go, is that staff is going to provide that information, or is that going to be on the applicant to come up with what the waivers are?
So I think the language of the waiver, through you, Mr. Chair, will probably put together the information like lot by lot that fuels that we obviously take from information that's submitted. But I have a pretty good idea of how that will structure out from that discussion, at least in my head.
So I think we'll talk about, we have multiple different waiver provisions. I think we'll talk about the one or multiple that are possibly applicable. And then we'll talk as a commission and make a finding as to whether they are applicable or not. And if they are applicable, then we'll proceed with the project with that waiver. If they're not applicable, then we'll proceed with the project allowing the properties that qualify to proceed, but not the other properties unless additional information could be provided to support that. So I think we have a big discussion ahead of us on that one. Thank you all. Mr. Nyland, go ahead.
First of all, yeah, we have a responsibility with respect to the waiver, so we'll supplement whatever the commission's going to provide. We obviously disagree with your finding or your sole interpretation of the coverage of the infrastructure, and I think we would like to see how the rest of the commission views that matter. And then third, if we're going to continue this, we talked at the last meeting that you were going to have special meetings so that we could get through this. we couldn't set that up at the last meeting, so we set tonight because we weren't able to set those special meetings. So I'm hoping that the commission will be able to set some special meetings so we can get through this thing quickly.
Thank you, Attorney Nyland. We will talk about a meeting schedule at this point before we continue the hearing. And I will just say, though, with respect, I disagree that this is my sole opinion on the imminent danger. I'll direct you to watch the recording of the hearing on August 8th. And we all had a pretty specific discussion on protecting structures versus infrastructure. And it seemed at the time that the commission all felt in a specific way. That was the same as I felt, so.
I don't recall a vote that was taken that night, straw or otherwise.
Okay.
I recall two people offering their opinions, and that was it.
Okay, so we, for the sake of the applicant and the application process, we should probably have a discussion on that, but I want everyone to have this sink in and give a little bit of time to please reread those sections of the bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act so that you can understand the potential disagreements. And unfortunately, I do believe this rises to the level of needing a legal opinion, so I will direct Jeff, if you guys will give me the ability to do so, to obtain a legal opinion on that.
I think we didn't vote to go to George for that at the last meeting for Gap Lots specifically. Didn't I make that motion?
I'll have to double check, but I don't believe we ever voted that through.
We did. I think 4 of us or 3 of us voted to go to George and ask him about this Gap Lot thing, since we had more specific questions for the other guys.
We're gonna review the
I'll double check.
the hearing, and then we're gonna bring this back up. And if we need to send this for a legal opinion, we will. If it's already been asked for, then that's fine as well.
We were upstairs.
Well, we're gonna review.
I'll review it. My notes say different, but I'll double check.
Thank you.
Watch the meeting again on video.
Yeah, Jeff's gonna do that.
already
So
done
you
it
don't,
once, so
so
I'll
you
do
don't
it
have
again.
to, and then we're gonna decide how we need to proceed from there. So commissioners, on the topic of special hearings, I definitely would like to get this onto a special hearing schedule for everyone's sake, because it is confusing and complicated to have this and other business on the same agenda. Luckily, like today, we have a small, normal agenda, but it's not always like that. So we're going to try to do that.
Right now?
Right now, yeah, with at least get some potential dates out there.
Staying on a Thursday?
So that being said, okay, that being said, I'm gonna just unfortunately deflate some steam out of the room here, because Thursday, the 29th and September 12th are both dates that I physically cannot be present or cannot be present via Zoom. And those are probably the 2 next Thursdays that would be on the special hearing schedule. So I'm gonna request that we talk on Thursdays that are farther off into the future, but we also begin to discuss additional dates, like taking over some of the field viewings or doing something to get these on the calendar, because we do really have to do that.
And we can make any date work. We have plenty of meeting spaces available, so whatever works for you guys.
Okay.
But we can do it in place of field viewings. It's totally fine with us.
All right, so our next field viewing is on a Tuesday because of Labor Day. It's September 3rd. Would people be willing to take that September 3rd for a hearing on this?
I can't.
Permit.
That's HTC, every Tuesday.
I'm available.
I can't do Tuesdays at all.
Go ahead, Mike, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. I don't see how we can do it with everybody being present at all times. It's just going to get difficult, but I'm available on that Thursday.
We can't mull them back in, so they have to be all present.
Yeah, I mean, with respect, what you're saying might logistically be true, but I would endeavor, if possible, to have as many members here as we can, because if we start to have people with the inability to sit on this anymore because of the Mullen rule, that's bad for everybody, the applicant and us, and the sake of the process, so.
Or we start at 4 o'clock again.
Yeah, we could do that, but hey, Will, can you describe or show some of the potential dates available?
I can show you all the Mondays on this. Oh, and let me stop sharing this on Zoom, sorry.
You can't do it at the same time as the planning board meeting. That's at 4 o'clock also, in here.
It's listening time.
Okay, yeah, let's listen to Will, see
All
what he
right.
has to say, and then,
So I've got our Monday site visits at 4 p.m. Starting. So that's September 3rd is a Tuesday. That's tricky, but September 16th, September 30th, October 15th. Sorry, this moved. Oop. November 4th, November 18th, December 2nd, and December 16th. I also have a list of our alternate Thursday dates, handwritten. I can't share that on the screen, but
yep. So I think at this point, it seems like the earliest possible date, unfortunately, we could meet because of my personal restrictions would be September 16th. Please, commissioners, raise your hand if you're available on September 16th.
What day is that?
It's a Monday.
I'm not,
No?
I'm traveling.
We get to go away.
You're working out.
Okay.
What about that Thursday, September, I guess September 19th is the regular hearing date.
What are our meetings that month, 5th and 19th?
5th and 19th?
What about September 26th?
What day is
So
that?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Raise your hand if you can do September 26th.
We have the regular hearings in between there,
Sorry,
too.
John, but you don't have to be here, so.
You can
He's
skip this.
fascinated by it.
September 26th?
I think I'm good.
So let's definitely get September 26th on the calendar.
No, I'm sorry. I'm traveling again.
Can you zoom in while you're traveling or no?
It would be very difficult because I'll be in Europe. Sorry.
Janice is like a little to me right now.
All right.
Sorry.
What about, sorry to do this, what about dates that aren't Mondays or Thursdays?
I can't do any Tuesdays.
What about Wednesdays?
What about Wednesdays?
Wednesdays
We would
that
have to
works
not
for me.
conflict with the select board.
We could do
We
it,
don't have to, we won't be in this room probably anyway.
yeah.
You
We'll,
gotta
we'll
check
go to
with
like the
TV.
trailer or go somewhere.
I'm okay almost every Wednesday.
How about August 28th? It's next Wednesday. We'd have to post it like today.
No, we only have to
No,
post.
Or post it, we could post it on Monday, yeah. August 28th, raise your hand if you could do August 28th.
But we can always do next Thursday, August 29th.
No, I can't, unfortunately. I wish I could, but I
And
have a,
ZBA is in front of us with the FDR.
I have a
stuff.
full day thing where I'm gonna be speaking. I can't do it.
You're speaking now.
Yeah, but for something else.
I can't do the 28th, that's move-in day on UMass.
Okay. It's not your fault, but what about Fridays, everybody? Who wants to have a nice Friday evening?
Not Labor Day weekend on a Friday?
Not necessarily, but how about September 6th?
I'm fine then.
That's fine.
We have the regular meeting on the 5th, and we could do the 5th
And the 6th, 2 nights in a row.
And then if everyone by the 5th can provide every date they're available in September and October, we can
And
merge
not
them
by
together.
doodle.
Can commissioners raise their hand if they could do September 6th?
I can do it for a limited period of time.
What time?
I think I have to check, but I think I'd have to be off by 6:30.
So could we start at like 4 or even 3?
I'm fine at 4.
Yeah.
We can start whenever you guys want that day.
Can people
I'm
start
fine
at
4,
Yeah.
not
3,
I can't do
3:30, 4?
4.
Okay. Representatives from SBPF, would you be willing and able to make a meeting on September 6th at 4 PM?
Yeah, that's a Friday. Nobody has meetings on Friday, so if that's what we need to do to make it go, then, and it would be it sounds like it'd be from 4 to 6:30.
4 to 6,
Yeah.
4 to 6.
Now, we are continued to the 5th, right? And we are going to be on the 5th,
We
correct?
haven't continued it to the 5th yet, but we certainly can continue it to the 5th, have some discussion for a short amount of time, and then more discussion on the 6th. But I don't want to have a meeting on a Friday either, but we have to move along in the process, so that's what we have available to us.
able to set up what we're doing on the 5th, on the 6th.
Is that acceptable?
Yes, we'll make ourselves available.
Thank you.
Okay. Tell me
Hold on.
the 5th first.
So it sounds though like Mr. Nyland, you would also like to present on September 5th?
Yeah, we haven't gotten through, and while we're still putting together answers on the waiver and other matters, we still have other provisions to go through. So I don't think that we need to do this on a linear basis. We can address the other matters as we're preparing to answer for the ones that we talked about today. So we're hoping that we can respond to those items, but if not, I think we still have an open plate here to deal with matters.
Thank you. And I would say, obviously, if you don't have it ready for the 5th, you could continue to the 6th if you need to. So I think I'm willing to have us have a discussion on the 5th and the 6th, but on the 5th, 1 hour max, and then we'll have 2 more hours on the 6th.
And so what time are we on is that at 4 o'clock on the 5th? What
Are
time is it?
people available at 4 o'clock on the 5th?
We can't be changing the time.
We
to
cannot.
this room.
So we're going to be meeting at 5, but we're going to be giving you the first hour for that meeting.
Okay.
And then we'll be giving you 2 hours on the 6th. Okay.
I'm sorry.
So with
Is that 4 to 6 on the 6th or?
4 to 6 on the 6th, we have to make sure at a staff level that we can get a location and everything posted and confirmed, but put it in your calendar and then we'll get it confirmed with the staff.
Yeah, but thank you very much.
Okay, so with that being said, we are going to continue this hearing to September 5th. No, we don't have to make any motions. We're just continuing it.
Yeah, it's assented to by the applicant.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I very much appreciate all your time and everybody's time today. And what we're going to do.
Seth, what condition did we end at, so I know where we're starting?
We went through all the findings except for we need a little bit more discussion on 22. We talked about the imminent danger criteria, and we have not talked about any other conditions at all at this point.
26 or whatever it is.
Start with 26.
Okay, thank you all. So with that, we will be moving on in our agenda to Pocomo LLC at 61 Pocomo Road, SE 483801, represented by David Haynes. David Haynes, are you here with us today?
I certainly am. I've been enthralled with your conversation, and now that you're all warmed up, the warm-up band did a great job. I hope you're all ready for this very uncomplicated one.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Go ahead.
61 Pocomo Road is this is a simple move back of the existing house. It needs a new foundation. We're putting a full basement under it. These are two houses that are designed by an architect named Venturi that are very special. Anyway, and there are restrictions on the property that make it so we can't move it back even farther. However, we are moving the house back about 5 feet, getting inside of the 50-foot setback. The resource areas on the site are land under the ocean, which is Nantucket Harbor, and the beach associated with it. Then there's a coastal bank. That coastal bank a few years ago was worked on to stabilize it along with like 3 or 4 other houses going to the west. So the bank is stable, even though the historic shoreline erosion rate is about a half a foot per year. And the long-term erosion rate is a half a foot per year, and the short term is 1.5, making the setbacks from that top of that bank between 10 and 23 feet per year requirement at 20 times the annual erosion rate. The house is being moved from just inside of 50 to just outside of 50. So it does meet performance standards for meeting the 50-foot setback. Also, we are asking for a waiver because we're working on a structure that is currently within 50 feet. I conservatively asked for the waiver. There is no other reasonable alternative. It will not alter. We're relocating it to outside of 50. So that work doesn't need the waiver. There are the constrictions on the property are there are easements for the water line, the electric line. There's also a very a deed restriction about the vegetative condition of the lot and not going in, leaving all the existing vegetation that's between the house and the road, and the house and the side yards, view easements, and various other things. So we're sliding it back. We're putting it on a full basement. I know it isn't a requirement that we maintain a 2-foot separation to a bank, but to the groundwater table, but we are maintaining that. So the area is also not within natural heritage, and no review by them is necessary. So in my opinion, it did require a waiver for work on the existing structure that we're moving outside. Where the new structure is doesn't require a waiver. We're working all within existing lawn area. Also, we are proposing to put in a hot tub with a canister type system and no discharge of backflow, and any water that has to be discharged from it or drained from it in the wintertime will be either out of the buffer zone or pumped into a tank truck and hauled to the dump, hauled to the sewage treatment plant. There will be sediment erosion control around the limit of work, all within existing lawn. The existing 25 vegetative buffer will be maintained, and all other vegetative buffers will also be maintained. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, David. And just quickly, I don't believe the project needs a waiver because the property is inside the 50-foot buffer. I mean, you're allowed to do work in the 50-foot buffer. You're just not allowed to do work in the 25-foot buffer, but it doesn't really matter either way. But I don't think we need a waiver for this.
I was just being concerned when I asked for it. Just make sure I didn't have to come back.
Thank
take
you.
Take up any more of your time.
John, welcome to the deliberations tonight. Do any members of the commission have questions or comments? Do any members of the public have questions or comments? Seeing none, staff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, and I don't have to cook up a waiver right now.
Thank you. Mr. Haynes, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to
I'll
close?
make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Joe. We'll give Joe the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? That carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you later.
Thank you as well. And that will that will move us on to Nantucket Conservation Foundation, Pest House Pond, SE 48 3802. Naomi Valentine, are you presenting this? Or Jennifer Carberg?
Hello. Yes. Sorry,
go ahead,
waking up my
please.
Zoom.
Yeah, please identify yourself for the record and then proceed.
Of course. Naomi Valentine from SWCA Environmental Consultants, representing the Nantucket Conservation Foundation for the project announced. As the commission may recall, the Conservation Foundation has an existing permit for the Pest House Pond property, which is immediately adjacent, sort of northeast of the parcel in question for this permit. Just for the record, that's under file number 483090. Only reason I reference that is that this scope of work proposed has to do with the management of Phragmites australis, which was a small portion of the original Pest House Pond property order of conditions. So these three small populations of Phragmites have popped up just in the area shown on the shared screen. And the property is owned by an LLC who the owner of that LLC has signed as landowner. The Nantucket Conservation Foundation is managing this property on their behalf. And it's a simple proposal, similar scope of work. It would be proposed to be managed with herbicide application, just targeting those Phragmites stems. And as it's on a different parcel, this is being presented as a separate notice of intent. I could go into more details, but I may just pause there and wait for questions unless, Mr. Chair, you'd like me to elaborate on anything else in particular.
I think it's fine. Any members of the commission have questions or comments? Any members of the public have questions or comments? Okay, I just have one thing. It's related to the 5-year orders of condition being requested, and we can talk about this a little bit more later under the order. And although we theoretically do have the ability to issue an order that is 5 years, it has not been the standard practice of the commission to do so. And if you read the specific language of the bylaw that talks about that, it requires that the applicant provide specific proof as to what would compel this order to have a longer time period. So it's normally 3 years. I think for everyone's sake, we'll just keep it to 3 years. But if you do wish to make the case, you're welcome to. But in the NOI, as I read it, it wasn't really that explicit. So yeah, it can be extended or whatever, but.
Right, that's accurate. I apologize. I didn't realize that specific rationale would be needed. It was mostly because previous extensions had been required for the adjacent parcel, but no problem with coming back before the commission for extensions if needed. I think that's fine.
Thank you. Staff, do we have everything we need to close this application?
Yes, we do, Chair Engelberg.
Naomi, would you like to close the application?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. That will bring us to amended orders of conditions. We'll start with 13 Commercial Street, LLC, which is at 13 Commercial Wharf, SE 483563. And this is represented by Paul Santos. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of the property owner and applicant, 13 Commercial Street LLC. Ann, who is sitting to my left here, is the property owner. Her daughter Gigi took a 1-hour lesson in civics today and then decided to go home. So happy to be before you. This is an application seeking permission for the construction of an addition with associated grading, landscaping, and utilities within land subject to coastal storm flowage in the buffer zone to a coastal beach. The plan that you see before you on the screen depicts the property. We're on commercial street, if you will, a commercial wharf. This is the end of the street before you make the left turn to head towards High Line or the wharf area. This is an existing developed property with a single-family residential home on it. It is in the flood zone. Specifically, it's actually in a velocity zone. So the house itself is currently elevated on a pier system. It's not a foundation, it's elevated on piers. So land subject to coastal storm flowage, specifically the V zone, which is elevation in this particular area, elevation 9. And then we have the coastal beach, which runs along the southern side of the property, running in kind of an east-west direction, as you see on the plan there. So you see the existing dwelling, deck off the back. What we're proposing to do is, this is an amendment to an order of conditions that we received back in 2022, in which the commission approved the infill of the current entryway to the dwelling and some additional stairs along the backside, and some modifications to the dwelling, internal or externally, but within the existing footprint. By way of reference, the current dwelling first floor elevation is at elevation 8.1. This was constructed in compliance with the flood zone standards in effect at the time this home was renovated, or essentially it was a tear down and a rebuild. In 2014, the new flood mapping came into place, which set the velocity zone at 11. Under the current standards, the first floor of this building would have to be raised to elevation 15.2, which is approximately 7 feet higher than what is currently out there. And the project you all see now that this board permitted and is getting built on Washington Street, where you see the concrete piers out there, I think that's the first one that is being built to the 2014 standards. So you see those piers. Now the piers are going to be there. There'll be a framing system, and then the building will be put on top of that. Under the 9th edition of the building code, when you're in a velocity zone, the first floor elevation, or the first floor has to be, basically, the flooring system has to be 2 feet above the flood zone. So you have 11 plus another 2, and then that's the lowest horizontal member or structural member in the velocity zone. So in the velocity zone, it's a dramatic difference than what we've been normally seeing in the AE zone. So in this case, again, this building is elevated on piers, and to meet the standards, it would have to go another 7 feet higher. Luckily, in this particular case, and that's why we're back here today, is the work that we're proposing on the structure does not reach the 50% threshold, which is basically a requirement that says if you're renovating a structure and the work itself exceeds 50% of the fair market value of the structure itself, you're then required to bring the structure into full compliance with the flood zone standards. At the time we came before you previously, we thought that may be the case, and that we would have to elevate this building a lot higher than we need to. We don't expect that is the case now, so Anne has the option of keeping the building at potentially the elevation is now. I think she would like to raise it, but not raise it obviously 7 feet. So by doing this, what we're asking the commission to do is, we had previously had a set of entry stairs at the front of the building. We're looking to put an addition on the front of this dwelling, approximately 24 feet in length by about 10 feet or so in depth, and then construct a stairway which would come in, wrap around, and then go back down along the side of the structure. That's all depicted in red. This area occurs completely within a developed area of the site. It's between the building and Commercial Street. It's actually a part of it is currently a driveway or a parking area. We would relocate the parking area to the west and then construct this addition to the home. We do have waivers for the work previously in the order of conditions. This work would follow along those waivers, where we would be building within the 50-foot no build. If you look on the plan itself, you'll see three diagonal lines. The first one is the coastal beach, which essentially is partially underneath the structure. The 25-foot setback, and then the 50-foot setback. So this work as the previous work we had approved does occur within the 50-foot no-build. However, it does occur landward of the resource area in an area that's already developed on a heavy traveled commercial street. Those of you familiar with the building, the front of this building is somewhat architecturally awkward. There's really no entry into this building. So the addition that we're asking for tonight, the HDC had looked favorably on because it gives them the ability to provide a kind of an entryway into this structure. Again, that's the extent of the application, is the addition off the front. The building is completely elevated. It would be a pier system, so you're not having any obstruction to your land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is the concern in some areas. Not a foundation wall, no flood vents. It's basically current buildings on a wood piling system. And we would either mimic that system or come up with something additional. We also then have the option potentially of raising the entire structure, but Ann will make that call when the time comes. That's the extent of the application. Ann is here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Paul. And would you wish to speak at this time? You're not required to, but you are afforded the ability if you like.
Thank you. I think
You just have to use the mic if you're going to.
thank you for the opportunity. I think I'll wait to see if you all have any questions or
Great,
your
I appreciate
comments.
it. Commissioners, questions or comments? Yes, Linda.
I didn't have any problem with it when it came in the last time, and it ran into somewhat of a buzzsaw from some members, but I don't have any problem with it this time, and I didn't have any problem with it last time, and I'd like to see it come up higher out of the flood zone, if not 15 feet. I'd like to see it come up higher, which I think is good for any structure over there. I have to remind some of the newer members that Mickey Rowland's building to the right on this map was just picked up, moved across that wharf, and over there when we took that building out. So there's a whole open space next to her, then the open wharf, hopefully that'll come back. And then she's got an awful lot of construction already there to her west going towards Washington Street. So I don't have any problem with this.
Thank you. Other members?
Where's
Yes, Mike, go ahead. You'll go next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So does the parking that is going away that's there now, is that how it goes? The addition is coming out and sort of into the parking area? Am I reading that correctly on the plan?
Yes, the parking will move
Over
west
there.
to the other side of the lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. John?
That's what I was going to ask. Where is the parking going? So
Thank you.
I see it now. Okay, thanks.
Yes, the HDC really liked this plan initially and liked that we were putting a formal entrance. It looks a lot better from the street, and then that allows a better area for parking and then entering into the home.
Thank you. So when Linda Williams is talking about the members who had significant concerns with this project, she's talking about me.
No, the two that are no longer here.
And the reason why is for the following reasons. It's because not only are we in the velocity zone here, but we're also in the buffer zone to the coastal beach. And within that 50-foot setback of the coastal beach, no structure at all is really supposed to be allowed. We understand, obviously, that there is a pre-existing structure that does exist in that area, but at the time, there was a significant concern about adding additional structure in that area. And really, we can probably go back in the record and find this, but the waiver was ultimately approved on a very specific requirement. And it is that the areas that are new construction in the original plan really just represent the stairway areas. And the rest of the project was taking up area that already existed on site. And the commission at the time was willing to accept the addition of the stairway area because it was physically necessary. There was no alternative to access the property. There was no reasonable alternative to access the property. But in the plan that's presented tonight, it's an addition in the area where building additions should not be allowed, and that causes impacts to the coastal beach. And it also causes, it causes impacts to the coastal beach and the land subject to coastal storm flowage. And one of these impacts is wetland scenic views. And Linda talked about the areas along the street that have been recently changed or are becoming parks, and also obviously along Washington Street. There's land bank parcels that have recently become undeveloped. And adding additional area to obstruct those views is not in line with the performance standards of our regulations. And I think we need to really carefully consider that this is a project that got a waiver for a very specific purpose. And now the request obviously would have to get a new waiver, but the request is very much outside of that specific purpose. It's really for an expansion of space and for an architectural design. And although I'm sure the HCC believes this is an architecturally better design, our job isn't to base our decisions based on architectures, to base it on the resource areas and the performance standards of those areas. So I will end it with that, but I just want any commissioners to weigh in on that. Yes, go ahead. And then we'll get to you.
I don't see how it's impacting the view. It's within the body of, if you look at the elevations on the first couple of pages, it's within this, I'll say what I said the last time. It's within the body of the structure, so it's not obstructing any view. It's on the side where it's cobblestones, trucks, NIR, the boat basin, everything else going on Commercial Street. I see the impact as to be nil, number one. Number two, it's going up out of the flood zone so the water can go in and out even under the addition, which is in the body of the structure. So I had a hard time then not approving it because of the de minimis nature of it. And the fact that it's coming up, which means there'll be more flow, and it does flood down there, more flow underneath that structure by simply pulling it up. And when you pull it up, like I said the last time, you got to add stairs, because otherwise, the same comment I made the last time, what is she supposed to do? Throw herself into it and throw it out onto the cobblestones? So I had a difficult time with that, or put a ladder on it. That was the other comment I made at the time. So I still do not have an issue with this, and I think it's a net gain to get it farther up so there's more flow underneath it. So I'm still having the same issue.
Thank you, Linda. And I'll just point out that the new proposal is not just for stairs, it's also for an additional structural area.
Which they asked for the last time, I didn't have a problem with.
So other commissioners wishing to weigh in, and then we'll get back to you.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm a little confused. Are you raising the house or not raising the house?
Yeah, you can answer that.
Yes, and as I explained when we first proposed this addition as well as the stairs, is if you see how small this house is and the plan for it, adding a new entry, much like throwing yourself out on the street, the interior version of that is you now have stairs in a new location because HDC wants it in the front, and you need space for additional stairs, but when you come into the home, you need an area to
Yeah, but my question
in.
is, you're putting an addition on and you're raising the whole house and the addition?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes,
all right,
but
this wasn't
not
clear.
to, I don't think we're going to have to raise it to the 15 or the 11, whatever it may be, because we are not going to be doing 50%. And if I may address the line of sight, there definitely is no impact to the line of sight. In fact, for purposes of the land bank, land next door and the park, this will be nicer than seeing cars parked right there. I mean, I have big SUV, so that's already blocking anything you'd want to be looking at. I also would like to make the comment that I wanted to revisit this because the house that was moved over to next door, the property that was next door that was move down, has about the same amount of additional square footage to it, not only on the commercial street side, but also with a balcony over the water that wasn't there before. So I don't understand the logic that on commercial street, where there's no impact to site, there's no impact to the beach itself, why this would be a problem.
Thank you. The difference is because of that property and this property have different buffer zones and different resources on site, and you're asking to build within an area that is generally not allowed to be built in unless a waiver is issued. So I'll go to other commissioners. John, go ahead.
Are there any other waivers that potentially would be applicable in this case, or is this just?
I mean, yeah, the commission has the authority to issue a waiver, has the authority to issue any number of waivers, but the burden of proof for why that waiver is required is on the applicant.
I had a chance
Go ahead,
to
Joe.
walk.
Yep, you're good.
It's on. I had a chance to walk by this house whenever it came up the first time, at least a year ago. And what was proposed made sense based on the surroundings that are there. I had no problem with what they wanted to do,
What they want to do originally or what they would like to do now?
what they would like to do now.
Okay. Other commissioners? This is a public hearing, so we will go to members of the public. Oh, yes, Mike, go ahead.
So when I saw this in the packet, I knew we'd be having a little bit of a discussion, and we did not have the ability this week, due to a conflict with other meetings, to go out and do site visits. And I'm going to throw it out there for a request. I hate to prolong things for people, but it seems like it would be worth a site visit to look at it. Maybe it doesn't have to be staked out, but maybe marked out, painted out, and that would be my request, and that might just get us all to a quicker decision.
Thank you. Are other members of the commission wishing to do a site visit?
I'd like that too.
Thank you. Will, can you arrange a site visit with the applicant and the applicant's representatives? And
Are you
then
here on the 5th?
we will go to a member of the public who wishes to speak.
He's not here on the 5th.
Okay, so, just so you know, for everyone's benefit, if you're unable to make the scheduled group site visit, any member of the commission has the authority to access the property for the purpose of viewing the site at any time. If you are going to go there, please be polite. You know, if it's daytime hours, please knock and announce that you're a member of the Conservation Commission going to do a field viewing. But you have the ability under the bylaw, the regulations, to do that. Yes, Will, go ahead.
I was just going to say that is 1,000,000% you're right, but also feel free to get in touch with me if you ever can't make a field viewing, and I'll go with you. I'd be happy to meet any commissioner there and give you a rundown.
And there's no need to knock on the door. You're welcome to go by anytime.
Okay, thank
Half
you.
the town does anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I drive past there on a pretty frequent basis, or walk past there. But we appreciate that.
So before, I know RJ.
Yes, go
wanted to
ahead,
speak.
Mr. Santos.
Just so we're talking about the Monday prior to the next meeting, we're still doing the standard site walks on the Mondays before, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
It's going to be, it's actually going to be a Tuesday in that
Okay,
case.
Tuesday,
It's going to
yeah.
be September 3rd, but yes, it'll be Tuesday, September 3rd.
Okay. And then, we'll let RJ's comments, and then we can follow up on that.
Thank you. Mr. Turcott, please go to the
She
mic,
has
identify
another
yourself, and then we'll get back to you. You'll have appropriate time.
RJ Turcott on behalf of the Land and Water Council. We were a part of this conversation in 2022, and not too much has changed in the 2 years since. This is one that the 50-foot rule, the 50-foot no-build rule is one of the ones that the commission is able to be black and white on. And there have been, I've been here for 5 years, there have been quite a few projects where people have come in for less, applicants have come in for less and have been denied because increasing the structure in a resource area, if the sustained storm damage is going to have an impact. Now, maybe there is a different waiver that can be requested that can be met, but it hasn't been asked for yet. If the additional access in the front is critical and necessary, that would meet the waiver request, but the addition would not historically with this commission. And that's been clear for dozens and dozens and dozens of projects. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turcott, and go ahead and respond.
Thank you. What has changed is that this particular area is very unique for Nantucket because of what's happening in this area. First, we have the house that was moved and has about the same amount of space that has been added, plus a new balcony over the water, and that is all still within the same zone. There's also a lot that has happened on the beach area without an easement and without authorization from me. In fact, I flatly said they couldn't do it. There's a town sewer that carries stormwater that eroded and busted right on the, I think that's the northwest corner of the deck. And town staff came in, and even though I told them they couldn't, dug up the entire beach and put in with crane, like with big diggers, everything, altered the scape of this beach and dug it all up and put in a new pipe. So this is also an area where I'm finding it extremely difficult to deal with this commission saying that this is a precious, do not touch the sand, do not do something here, when I just witnessed the atrocity that I witnessed. The next day, there were dead fish, dead bird. I have plenty of pictures of when it happened. They opened up the pipe, and just this storm of water came rushing out, created a new river right under my deck there, created actually like a quicksand, like erosion. There were pieces of sand falling off like it was an iceberg. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, you actually like heard the sand collapse down. And it was such an outrage. And Gigi, who you saw here earlier, she was out the next morning and couldn't believe the dead fish. I've talked to the Mariah Mitchell, same thing. So I'm like, well, you know, if there ever was a time to alter something, you know, it's already been detrimentally altered. And to tell you the truth, I love what you do as the water conservation. The reason I didn't want to give the town authorization is because the EPA would never allow you to just put unfiltered stormwater into the harbor. And so I refused to give them authorization, and they went ahead and did it anyway. And then I have the pictures with the oil slick.
Yeah, so this is certainly concerning. And I'm going to request that you send all the documentation, all the pictures, your refusal of them to allow the town to do that to our staff, Will. And
No, I have not sent
No,
anything yet.
no.
I waited until today.
I'm going to request that you do all that. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin an enforcement investigation. And we're going to look to see if the town actually acted beyond their capacity without the benefit of the permit. And if it's found that they did do that, we're going to issue an enforcement order against them. Because independent of how I feel about your project proposed, it's our duty to ensure that no violations happen anywhere on Nantucket by any party. So I implore you to send all that in, and Will, I implore you to look into it. And on our next meeting, to add this property under potential enforcement actions, and if we can proceed on that, we certainly will.
All right, thank you.
Yep. I will just say on the other point, and this is the part that's tough about wetland permitting, because as, you know, just a rational citizen, I hear what you're saying, but our role, unfortunately, isn't to view projects on their architectural style or based on what's happened in the neighborhood or based on other events. It's to very specifically look at, will the proposed items on the plan have impacts to the resource areas? And so that's unfortunately how we're going to constrain the scope of our review. But we will proceed with the enforcement investigation. Paul, would you like to go?
Sure, thank you. I welcome the site visit. I think it's a great idea. It truly is a commercial street. It's a commercial, I think this is really the only single-family home left in that particular area. And I will submit a specific waiver request for this particular amended order request.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate that. Is there anything else commissioners or members of the public would like to discuss on this one? So we need to continue to a date certain. Would you like to continue this to September 5th?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. That will be continued until September 5th. And thank you, and tell Gigi that she deserves a Junior Civic Service Award for her
She
participation.
does. Definitely
today.
waiting for me for dinner.
Will's going to give you his contact information, and please send the information over to him.
My phone's dead, but I'll.
If you have it, pictures or whatever, send it over. Okay. All right. All right. So this has already been continued, and that will bring us to El Nagar at 30 Union Street, SE 48 3652, which is represented by David Haynes. He is up there. David, take it away.
Excuse me, sorry about that. What we have here is a request for an amended order of conditions at 30 Union Street. There was this was originally a notice of intent for a garage and a deck and driveway work and some landscaping. What was omitted on that, because we didn't know about it, was they also wanted to put a little wooden deck out in their backyard and put a prefab sauna on it. And they went ahead and the work has been done. So this is an after the fact filing. We're trying to clean it. It was all within existing lawn. It's the wood patio, really. It's right on the ground. There was no regrading that was done with it. It was all over. It's all pervious beneath the wood deck, and also it's no displacement of flood storage. It is within land subject to coastal storm flowage. The work does meet the performance standards. No waivers are required. And it is outside of any natural heritage area, so no review by NHESP is required. The site is completely stable, and that's basically the project. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
Thank you. Commissioners? Mr. Haynes, do you have a photograph of this deck? It would be helpful.
I'm sorry,
Patio.
I don't have one available. I mean, I can get you one for the next hearing, but
Yeah, I asked because I know it's represented in your submission that this is a pervious structure and that it's, not going to reduce the ability of the land to absorb and contain floodwaters, but without actually seeing that, I can't prove that to either be true or not true. And I think we do need to see what it looks like to make sure that we're not running into problems with that performance standard under land subject to coastal storm flowage.
understood. It's a wooden slats with gaps between them, and it's sitting on 2x4s or 2x6s vertical.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
I
I
will-
understand the idea, but if the slats are like so close together that water's not really draining, it could be a concern.
I will get you a photograph.
Thank you.
Great.
So in that case, would you like to continue till September 5th?
Yes, please.
Thank you. That will continue to September 5th. And that will move us on to public meeting, request for determination of applicability.
I'm going to recuse from this. I tell Tim next door, so my family's on the other side, so.
Okay. So the item that Ms. Williams is recusing from is Hampson 59B Pulpus Road, represented by Art Gasparo. Good evening, Art.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm before you tonight with a request for determination of applicability for the construction of a gazebo to be associated with an existing pool and expansion of a small area of patio and a small stone retaining wall within existing permitted lawn area outside of the 50-foot buffer zone to an isolated vegetated wetland. And we've included the architectural drawings. I don't believe there'd be any impact on any of the interests protected by the commission. And I'd be happy to take any questions should you have them.
Thank you. Do members of the commissions have questions or comments? Seeing none, staff, have you been out to the site and do you have a recommendation for us?
Affirmative and affirmative.
What is that recommendation?
So we've got 3 different codes for this one. There were 3 boxes checked. So we have the positive 2A. Of course, I didn't write down what these actually mean, but the positive 2A is that the delineation is accurate. And then we had the -2. We have -2 and -3, which together they mean that the work takes place in the buffer zone.
But is allowed to proceed
But
without
is
a
allowed
notice
to
of intent.
proceed. Yes.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to issue the RDA with those numbers attached to it?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? That carries with 5 people in the affirmative and Miss Williams recused.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. And now that takes us on to minor modifications. We have Family Ties Act LLC at 11 Alliance Lane, SE 483457, represented by Brian Madden.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, project involves modifications to a previously approved guest house outside the 50-foot buffer zone. You can see what was previously approved in red and the new in the darker black. I'll turn over to any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Questions or comments from commissioners? Would somebody in that case like to issue the minor modification?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
And next, we have 256 Pulpus LLC, 256 Pulpus Road, SE 483644, represented by Art Gasparo. Art, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a matter that had been continued from the last meeting where the commission had requested we provide a revised plan, specific planting plan to remove the non-native species. Mirka is the architect, the landscape designer, on this, and modified her plan, and we have submitted that. And then there was also a request to include with the application the previously approved plan, which we've done. Again, briefly, this is a minor modification that does not alter the approved limit of work, and the scope of work is really residential redevelopment. There had been a house that was picked up and moved back here, and some additions. Really, they refined the plans for the landscape. The pool changed position, but there was an approved pool and remains outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. And then some relocation of some septic tanks. But again, all within the previously approved limit of work.
Thank you, Art. questions or comments from members of the commission? I will note that technically the hawthorn being represented is not a native species, and some of these are being proposed as cultivars, but it doesn't, I don't think anybody else on the commission cares other than I, so does somebody want to make a?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna abstain.
But they need to update those lists.
Yeah. I'm gonna abstain, so that carries with 5 commissioners in the affirmative and 1 abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that will take us on to certificates of compliance.
Correction on that list, though.
Okay.
Van Dyke,
Mr.
there's no
Chairman?
such thing as 74 North Beach Street. They live at 8 Jefferson.
Well, we'll get
Just
to
so
that.
you know.
We'll get to that when we do it, because I think the address changed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I request a 2-minute break?
Yes, we'll take a break until 8:05. Go ahead. Ugh. It did exist, I think.
For the record, I'm not on a real recess, so.
Okay, but it's 8 Jefferson.
I'm just saying.
Okay, yeah. Don't really deliberate. Just wait until.
This is not a deliberation, but a technical note for sound and AV purposes. I don't know who has a live mic, but Seth's microphone is ringing.
Yeah.
Because someone else has a live mic next to him, so Joe or Linda. Don't keep it open all the time, just turn it on if you're gonna speak. I got it. It's when Seth is trying to talk, his microphone goes feedback. I got this for the pros. CSCs are all reissues or not?
Oh, I know, it's, yeah.
We just need more, guys. Yes, please. The COCs are work that never started, and then the rest are reissues. Mariah Mitchell was the redo that never got done.
It's like riding the High Line. You gotta remember to dress for the occasion.
I had a whole separate, I literally changed mid-meeting. I had like a thin, short sleeve button down on, and I had a t-shirt with Carhartt, my backpack. I was like, I'll be right back. I want a Carhartt jacket.
All right, so we're back, and we're under certificates of compliance. And I just checked the Nantucket Wetlands Regulations and the Wetlands Protection Act, and nothing is prohibiting us from issuing these all at the same time. So we just do have to announce what they are
I'll
and read
read
off
them.
all the numbers.
I'll make a motion to approve 117 Nantucket Road Nominee Trust, SE 48-2776, Van Dyke at 8 Jefferson, SE 48-1523, Moores, there are three of them, I guess, at SE 48-276, SE 1276, and SE 48-3468, and Nantucket Mariah Mitchell Association, 3133 Washington Street at SE 48-2378.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Before we proceed to a vote, has staff been out to all these properties, and do you agree that they're all in compliance with their order?
Affirmative, affirmative, times 6.
And is there any ongoing conditions associated with any of these certificates of compliance?
As they are reissues, the reissues are written down. I believe there's only a couple, but they are all on there.
Okay.
Give me 1 second, sorry.
Yep.
Oh, goodness.
You gotta give me 1 second. They disappeared, my little sticky disappeared, but I don't believe we actually have to read them because they're reissues. They're included in the packet. They are written down on.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
It would just be for the Mariah Mitchell SE 48-2378, if there's any for that.
There's not for that one.
Seeing as the rest are reissues, the point of the reissue is just simply to reissue that cert that has already been issued but can't be found. So Linda made the motion, and who made the second? Joe made the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, that carries unanimously, and all of those certificates of compliance are approved. So that brings us to orders of conditions. We have two today. We have Pocomo LLC at 61 Pocomo Road, SE 48-3801. Will, if you could give us the high-level overview of this and go take us through it, that'd be great. And these were sent out, but can we get them on the screen as well?
I have them somewhere.
Bear with me. Just dragging this over. Also, side note, I am going to pass the signature pages to John, or actually to Mike, and we'll start from here.
Did you mark the one I can't sit on? When you do pass.
I lied, I won't pass them down. Give me a second. So 61 Pocomo Road. This was for the relocation of a structure at Pocomo, construction of the basement, spa installation, no NHESP. We had our conditions 18 and 19. And then our regular pool and lighting conditions, but I changed the word pool to hot tub and spa where necessary. Anything else?
You got all the usual ones in here.
Anything else from anybody?
No.
Okay, is there a motion to issue the order of conditions as drafted?
Motion to issue the order of conditions is drafted with that change to spa.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? That carries unanimously. And that brings us to Nantucket Conservation Foundation at Pest House Pond, SC 48 3802.
That was changed to 3 years and not 5 years.
Yes, we'll also send this out, but put it up on the screen, please.
So I believe the only change I've made to this, if you've read it, would be added an additional finding. This order will cover the typical OOC term of 3 years. Needs a period. Other than that, we've got our conditions 18 and 19. And then condition 20, any plant material removed from the site is to be disposed of through the digester at the Nantucket landfill. 21, a report including location photographs shall be provided to the commission showing the conditions prior to work being started and at the conclusion of the growing season. These reports shall include approximate Phragmites coverage and regrowth and native species regrowth within the project area. 22, should the project area show less than 50% regrowth of native species within the first 2 years and 6 months of the permit, the applicant shall file a new notice of amendment for supplementing the area with native plantings and/or seedings. 23, all reports are required annually until a COC is issued. And then we have our waiver specific to invasive species management. So waiver requested for 39018B1 that all projects which are not water dependent shall maintain 25-foot undisturbed area. The commission grants a waiver under section 39029C. I skipped a line, but it's the commission finds proper removal of invasive species from a resource area provides a net benefit.
Yep. One question is, I think we had started moving towards a date that reports should be sent in by. What was that date? I think we were just talking about the anniversary of the filing date, or not the filing date, the issuance date.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll do. All reports are required. I think we could word it, all reports are required annually on anniversary of date of issuance or on.
Yeah, by or on or before. Okay, anything else? Is there a motion to approve the order of conditions as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, John. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? That carries unanimously. And we don't have any extensions of orders today.
Yay.
Other business, we have one minute set to approve. That's April 4th, 2024.
Who's doing our minutes, by the way?
Elena Cano, who's the town minutes taker.
Not anymore.
Okay, well, she did this set of minutes at least.
I'll make an announcement.
Okay, so we can hear the announcement later, but on these specific minutes, is there any concerns or questions, or would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, all those in favor? John, for
Aye.
your benefit,
Aye.
you're allowed to vote aye or you're allowed to abstain, but it doesn't really matter.
Because you weren't here.
I
So,
wasn't here, so I'll abstain.
okay, so that carries with 5 commissioners in the affirmative and 1 abstained. All right, that will move us on to monitoring reports, which we don't have any at this time. Enforcement actions or potential enforcement actions, we'll start with Will. Anything there?
Nothing new to report this evening, and I am actually passing these down now.
Okay, Linda, is there something that you would like to say under enforcements? Okay, you have to put your mic on.
Yeah. 117 Baxter Road has turned into, I know the building commissioner went after her, she threatened him, Jeff went after her, and maybe while you were away, and Health went after her, because it is, we moved because I'm working on 116 across the street, so I know where it came from. She was told to take that platform that she created, a whole patio on the vacant lot where the house came from, take it out. She had no permission to do that.
All right.
And what's happened, though?
Thank you. I'll caution you not to proceed any further because this property is not on our
Well, I've asked him to do it.
agenda.
I asked him to do it.
Will, please put it on for the next
You
meeting.
didn't ask me to put this on the agenda, Linda. You didn't ask me.
No, I
have
talked to
idea
Jeff
what you're
about
talking- Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, it's clear that at this point, it needs to be on for the next agenda, and we're gonna discuss it then. We've been told that we shouldn't be discussing substantive enforcement stuff on items that aren't on the agenda. So with that, we are done with enforcement actions and potential enforcement actions. I believe we already did our CPC appointment. We appointed John. So I don't know why that's on the agenda, but then we have reports. So Crack, Tim, do you have nothing?
Nothing new.
I'm gonna pass these on and then I'll sign them at the end. Okay, CPC, anything to report, John?
We have a meeting tomorrow to assign
give it.
everything, and so nothing really now.
We are heading into the deadline is September 6th for applications to the CPC for funding. And people can go to the website and see the applications and start putting it all together, so it's not the day of. That's what usually happens.
Thank you. NP and EDC, Mike?
Nothing new to report. We haven't met since our last meeting.
All right, Harbor Plan, Linda?
You were at the Harbor Plan meeting. I wish you were sitting up here, but we got a draft. We had 35 people in here.
It's a great meeting.
It was a great meeting, and I didn't recognize him because he'd cut his hair, so I didn't know that was him over there. And we're closing in on this. We had some really good comments because there were 4 or 5 things that were brought up that we had not anticipated that are going to have to now be incorporated. So people are very interested in what we're doing, so I thought that was great. And we'll probably have a final draft for everybody to look at within a couple of months. Great.
Thank
Very
you.
pleased.
No
wind.
offshore wind work group. That will move us on to commissioners' comments. Any commissioners' comments at this meeting?
Great meeting, Mr. Chairman. It's not difficult for those first 2 hours.
Thank you.
It's ridiculously difficult.
Anyone else? Administrator or staff report?
Couple quick comments. Number one, we had one unanimous date for the procedural meeting. So that'll be November 14th. Location TBD. I can make that hybrid if anybody needs a Zoom option.
What time?
That'll be,
Determined.
I'm gonna guess 5 o'clock, but it can be flexible. If anybody has an issue that day, email me. But it would be 5 default for 5.
Can you send out the September 6th special SPPF meeting and that procedural meeting in an email tomorrow so everyone gets that on their calendar?
Yes, and let me just write that down because that's quite important. So the procedural update, November 14th. And that was September 6th at 5 p.m., right? To be clear.
4 p.m.
That's at 4? Okay.
4 to 6 specifically. Other reports beyond that?
The one other very quick report is whenever everybody has a chance, just check out the Conservation Commission page on the town website. I made some updates
Okay.
and whatnot.
Sorry, but people do need to sign this RDA. Just because your name isn't on it, you still have to sign in the blank lines. Not you, but
Not Linda.
everyone else. I did see the updates on the page. It looks good, so thank you. And so, is it true what Linda was saying, that we don't have a minutes taker anymore?
So, yeah, that's the third report. I'm sad to say that we have lost our minutes taker for the town. So we are, again, in a position where we are figuring out what the next step is with the minutes. Stay tuned. It's a fun issue for us to deal with.
Thank you. Anything else, Will?
That is it.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Linda. Is there a second? Thank you, Joe. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? That carries unanimously. This meeting is adjourned, and thank you all. Is this, Tim, is this your signature up here?
Yeah.
You signed on the lines next time.
Sorry.
It's okay. That's,
The lines are our friend.
Yeah.
it's
Tim,
okay.
I'm gonna go put my hands behind my
It's
Honda
fine.
exhaust. That's my.
It's fine. It counts still, but it just, yeah, it's fine.
Remember that from school then? The lines are our friend?
Yep.
I never paid any